undemocratic. Lib Dem MP Munira Wilson says it would have been a stitch-up and can't be allowed to happen in future.
Beyond U-turning on the forthcoming local elections, we Liberal Democrats again have put forward legislative proposals to make sure that government can never cancel elections on a whim again. We believe in democracy. We want people to have a say.
A 16-year-old girl and a 15-year-old boy have been found guilty of the manslaughter of a man they thought was a paedophile in Kent. The court heard 49-year-old Alexander Cashford was lured to a beach on the Isle of Sheppey last August. DCI Neil Kimber is from Kent Police.
Clearly there may be some moral stance on that, but what he'd actually done is nothing wrong. He was made aware that the female defendant in this case was 16. She was actually 16 in this case. I mean, in terms of the eyes of the law, he hadn't done anything wrong.
A 16-year-old boy previously pleaded guilty to manslaughter. AI chatbots could soon have a legal duty to prevent children from seeing harmful content, like social media platforms do. Sir Keir Starmer has promised to stand alongside parents who are concerned about the internet. They also want to tackle addiction to screens, which secondary school teacher and parent Josh thinks is necessary.
There's some young people that are fully aware of the issues, but maybe feel so tied in to their online lives that separating themselves from that feels almost impossible.
Oscar-winning actor Robert Duvall has died at the age of 95. He was best known for his roles in The Great Santini, Apocalypse Now and The Godfather.
And nobody has ever gunned down a New York police captain, never. It would be disastrous. All the 5 families would come after you, Sonny. The Corleone family would be outcast.
His wife's paid tribute to his love for characters, holding court and a great meal. And League One Mansfield Town's reward for knocking out Premier League Burnley in the FA Cup is a 5th-round tie at home to Premier League leaders Arsenal. The draw has just taken place. Among the other ties, Manchester City go to Newcastle and Wrexham will host Chelsea. In the City, the FTSE 100 closed up 27 points at 10,473. The pound buys $1.36 and €1.15. LBC weather, showers this evening fading to leave clear spells tonight and a widespread frost. There's a warning of snow in northern Scotland and ice for many northern and eastern parts of the UK. Lows of -3. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Matt Hewitt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Rejoice! I bring you some good news this fine Monday evening. It's Iain Dale here on LBC with you until 10 o'clock. You can, of course, watch the whole show on the LBC app, on Global Player and the LBC YouTube channel. But that is not the good news, ladies and gentlemen. The good news is something far more important. It's yet another government U-turn. I know you'll all be really surprised and shocked to hear that. But yes, they've done another U-turn. What on now, I hear you ask? Well, local elections. They're actually deigning to allow 30 different council areas to have elections, ones which they assured us had to be cancelled because the local authorities couldn't cope with the burden of reorganisation and local elections at the same time. Reform UK and the Liberal Democrats, they both said this is outrageous. I mean, the Liberal Democrats only slightly outrageous because one of their councils did opt not to have elections this year, but we'll forgive them that. But Reform UK decided to take the government to court. The 2-day hearing was supposed to start this Thursday, but today the government announced that they were pulling out of defending that and they would allow these elections to happen. So May the 7th is probably going to be the most important day in this Parliament to give us some idea of what everyone thinks about the different political parties. Now, the cynical among us, I mean, obviously I'm not a cynic, but I mean, the cynical among us did wonder whether the real reason for cancelling these elections was because they were all in areas where Labour is probably going to get trounced. 10 Labour councils possibly might be lost to Reform. Other areas that the Conservatives control could well be lost to Reform. So I'm not sure the Conservatives will be jubilant over this move either. But let's give credit where credit's due. Reform UK took them to court and effectively they've won. And the government have agreed to pay Reform UK's costs of £100,000. But, and this is where the news isn't so good, the government are giving £63 million of your money to these 30 councils to enable them to recruit more people to help them to run the elections. £63 million. So that's what this U-turn has effectively cost us, the British taxpayer. So I want to know from you in this hour whether you think this is the right thing to do, what it says about this government. Is it yet another nail in Keir Starmer's coffin? And perhaps, even if you're not a Reform UK supporter, we should actually all give credit where it's due. Shouldn't we? Aggie Chambray, quite an afternoon.
Quite an afternoon indeed, Ian. This was a massive shock when it dropped early afternoon that the government was effectively abandoning those plans to postpone elections across 30 councils. Now, these were councils who's basically come to the government and said, we would like to delay, effectively cancel for this year those elections. And the government had said, yes, OK. These were places where they were going from two-tier authorities to single unitary councils. And the argument being made by the government was that they basically didn't have the capacity required for the organisation. But as you say, Reform UK took them to court. They wanted to do a judicial review. And they didn't make it that far. The government effectively saying today that they were not going to win. They got this new legal advice. Now, we don't know exactly what was in that legal advice, but we do know that legal advice made them realise they were not going to win, and they pulled out of that decision.
Just on the legal advice, though, a lot of people will say, well, if they've got that legal advice now, shouldn't this have been available to them 2 or 3 months ago when they made this decision to go ahead?
That is a question that's been asked. The point being made is that it sort of all came together pretty last minute, and then they got this solidified legal advice. They wouldn't give exact timelines, but got that legal advice, and it was at that stage, I assume pretty late on, because this has, of course, happened pretty late on, and basically realised that they couldn't win this.
Well, it would be quite interesting to know when they got that legal advice, because you might have expected them, when Parliament was sitting last week, because we're in recess now, to announce it last week. But, of course, politically, possibly it's more convenient to do it when Parliament isn't sitting. And the Lib Dems have capitalised on that. They've demanded to see this legal advice.
I think there'll be so many calls to hear and see that legal advice, exactly what was in it. Because, as you say, the opposition is celebrating. This is how Nigel Farage responded earlier today.
That's why we took them to the High Court. We were due there this Thursday. They've caved, they've collapsed. It's a victory for reform, but more importantly, it's a victory for democracy in this country. We are delighted. I think the principle of no taxation without representation is a very well-known one through political history, and that's what was happening here. We'd even seen a few people starting to refuse to pay their council tax up and down the country. But what I do think now is the Minister, Steve Reid, has clearly acted illegally, and given that the government has now given in, knew they'd lose to us in court, I think Steve Reid's question as a minister should now be debated. We took a risk on this, but we knew it was the right thing to do, and there'll be a lot of people up and down the country very grateful to us.
Is Steve Reid in trouble?
Well, there are calls now for him to resign from Nigel Farage. I think, this is a pretty perilous moment for him. It's very, very difficult. He took a decision that he obviously deemed that he couldn't win or defend in a court of law. Now that decision was effectively sort of taken away from him, made instead by a minister in his department, Matthew Pennycook, who's the Minister for Housing. And now there are massive question marks over what happened, what that legal advice was, and indeed over his position. I think, there was already so much pressure about what was going to happen for the government, for the Labour Party on May the 6th and May the 7th. And I think there will be even more pressure now these local elections are going ahead.
Well, let's get we did actually ask the government to put someone up to talk about this, but they declined the opportunity. I wonder why that would be. Well, two parties who haven't declined the opportunity are Reform UK and the Liberal Democrats, as you might imagine. Darren Grimes joins us, Reform UK Deputy Leader of Durham County Council. Darren, very good evening to you. What's your reaction to this decision today? You must be jubilant.
Oh, absolutely, Ian. I mean, ultimately, for a party that's actually ran by North London lawyers, they don't seem very good at actually interpreting the law. They're about as good at that as they are governing the country. I think actually, Ian, you've been discussing how this is yet another U-turn. We've seen a lot of those, and there is a sort of understood and accepted premise that too many U-turns and you very quickly find yourself in the U-bend politically. Well, I see it more as an act of absolute surrender, Ian, because, to say that you were going to strip 4.6 million people of their democratic voice because you're terrified of the ballot box, well, If Reform did that, Iain, I can bet you my bottom dollar, I would put everything I own on this, that there would be accusations of being in the throes of fascism and all these other lofty claims. But when it's Labour that's trying to do it, it's A-OK. So I'm really pleased that the party took this decision. They, risked money, and now actually it's the taxpayer who's having to stump up, as you say, to help these local authorities run these elections and to actually pay Reform UK our legal costs. It's a totally grotesque situation that we find ourselves in, and it's an utter humiliation for the government.
I suppose, look, I said right from the start here that I thought this was an outrageous decision by the government in terms of democracy, and I think you're right. They were accused of being very authoritarian. The F word wasn't used about them, but it might well have been. But of course, this is going to put the onus back on you to really perform in these elections, because. Yes. I'm absolutely convinced that one of the reasons that they wanted to cancel them was because they saw the writing on the wall, that they thought they would lose all of the 10 councils that they offered the chance, 10 Labour councils that they offered the chance to cancel the elections, that they would lose those to you. So your party's going to have to step up to the plate now.
Absolutely. We put our money where our mouth is in actually bringing about this legal challenge, and we'll do it again in fighting these elections. We are the only party that fought for democracy. You mentioned the Lib Dems, but one of their local authorities actually stood against these elections going ahead. So, everyone else tried to actually cancel these elections, and Reform has beat them all. I agree there is a significant challenge for us, but I think in what we're managing to do in the 10 local authorities that Reform controls right now, it is actually a lesson to the rest of the country that you will get lower taxes. Reform
hang on a minute.
County Durham.
Hang on.
1.99% in County Durham.
Hang on a cotton picking minute. In Kent, where I live, they promised to cut council tax, and they're putting it up by 3.99%.
Well, Kent has been left in an absolutely unimaginable stress, right, because of the previous administrations that have been in control there. I don't envy their position, but they have actually lowered it from the what is the accepted 5% max tax to 3.99. So it's going in the right direction, and I'm confident that the leadership there, who I know and respect enormously, are going to get a grip of this, and we're going to see we are early on the pitch, and we're going to see by the end of full time a better performance than West Ham, Iain.
Well, that wouldn't be difficult at the moment, though. We did beat the mighty Burton Albion yesterday, so thank you very much for that. Let me play devil's advocate, because that's my job here. The argument now, of course, from these 30 councils will be, well, hang on a minute, they may be giving us £63 million to help recruit more staff to run these elections, but we're preparing for the reorganisation. We actually still won't have the capacity to do it. Now, on the face of it, that's a reasonable argument.
Well, we moved from a borough of districts and all the rest of it, a collection of these smaller local authorities, more localised, to a unitary authority. And we didn't cancel elections in that time. I think you can actually do this. You must do this. I think actually we've got to put on elections when they're actually due. I don't think actually this delay is, because as well as I do, Iain, that a delay in government terms very often is expedited and elongated in a really quite troubling way. So I'm not convinced that this wouldn't end up being the HS2 of local government, where it's just kicked down the road and you end up in a bizarre scenario where people for over 7 years have been elected as candidates. At that point, President Xi starts to look a bit jealous, doesn't he?
How's it going in your own council? Because I gather 6 Reform UK councillors have become independent. They're clearly not happy.
Well, no, we had some of them actually leave for health reasons. So we had one leave who had cancer. We had another leave because he took up work elsewhere. But one of them has gone independent recently, yes. And I'm delighted, Iain. It saved me having to do my spring cleaning come this spring. And I'm not a man that's fond of a mop, to be honest.
Leave that to Kemi.
Well, absolutely, absolutely not. Look, the way that party is going, where are they in all of this, right? They were complicit in actually delaying these elections. So I'll take no lectures from the mop from that party.
OK, Darren Grimes, thank you very much for joining us. Darren is Deputy Leader of Durham County Council. In a moment, we'll talk to a Liberal Democrat MP to get her reaction. Then we'll come to your calls. What do you make of this? I mean, it is what is commonly known as a cluster shambles. Saved myself there, didn't I? I don't think anyone can really object to that description of it, because if after only 18 months you've made 15 major U-turns, and there's probably quite a few other things which you could classify as mini U-turns, if that's a possible thing, I mean, it doesn't add to a reputation for competence, does it? Because this was easily foreseen. There were plenty of people, and I was one of them, who warned them of the consequences of this. It was fundamentally anti-democratic to cancel elections. It's the sort of thing you expect to happen in Russia and dictatorships, not the sort of thing you expect from a democratically elected government, even with the size of majority that this one has. So I want to get your reaction. What does it say about the Labour government, and also the fact that Reform UK did actually pursue this into the courts? And I say credit to them. And that's not me endorsing Reform UK, but I do believe in giving credit where credit is due. 0345 6060 973. Tess says, Ian, you're really funny. And I think you know it too. I'm not sure that was meant as a compliment, though, was it? 16 minutes past 7.
LBC.
Okay.
Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
It's 18 minutes past 7 on LBC. Let's take this text from Eric. This is not new. There are lots of precedents for delaying elections to allow local government reorganisation to be completed. 2021 postponement elections in Cumbria, North Yorkshire and Somerset were delayed from 2021 to 2022. That is true. I'll give you that one. But never have elections been delayed twice. For two years. That was my main objection to this. But on those facts, you are right, Eric. Right, let's talk to Alison Bennett, Liberal Democrat MP for Mid Sussex. Alison, welcome to the programme. Thank you for joining us. What's your reaction to what's happened this afternoon?
Well, I think the best phrase I can use is something my dad would say, which is that I'm having a total sense of humour failure about this. It's a total humiliation for the Labour Party. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Parliament when Steve Reid confirmed these elections weren't happening. He was, very, very indignant and fairly rude about the whole thing. And now he's totally had to fall on his sword. I think he needs to question his position permanently, to be honest with you.
Now, as a National Party, you have been consistent in opposing this, and that's very good. But there is a charge of hypocrisy here, isn't there, given the fact that Cheltenham Council, which is a Liberal Democrat-controlled council, was one of the 30 that applied to have the elections cancelled. So you're not quite as white as Reform are on this.
So I'm an MP in Sussex, and as I understand it, there were some specific situations in Cheltenham that only had all-up elections about 18 months ago. But at heart, I think this speaks to why it should never be given to councillors and councils whether they want to have elections or not. Elections and democracy will always have a certain financial cost associated with them. Giving councils that choice, particularly when they're so cash-strapped, is wrong. And that's why we've been passionately calling for these elections to go ahead.
Apart from in Cheltenham. I mean, I don't really buy the view that there was.
There were specific.
No, there weren't. Because are you seriously telling me that a Liberal Democrat-controlled council can't organise 2 elections within 18 months? I mean, we had 3 general elections in 3 years recently.
So my personal view is that these elections should have gone ahead everywhere, and I stand by that.
So you're critical of Cheltenham Council then?
Personally, yes, but I do understand that there were certain reasons why, and they'd had all-up elections 18 months ago.
Now, I gather that the Liberal Democrats are calling for the legal advice to be published on this, which I think would be a thoroughly good thing. It would be a transparent thing to do. Do you have any hope that the government will actually do it?
Well, they've promised to release all sorts of documents about a lot of things in the last couple of weeks, haven't they? So I think there might be a bit of a backlog coming.
There's no police inquiry here, though, is there? So there's no excuse.
No, they absolutely need to release that legal advice. And it's just extraordinary that they got to this point where they're staring down the gun barrel of an appearance in the courts this week before they've done this U-turn. It was all incredibly obvious when they first started announcing that they were going to reorganise local government in 2024 at a breakneck speed on timescales that are really aggressive. And local authorities going through that process are struggling to keep up with that pace. It was totally predictable.
Reform are obviously making hay about this because they had the guts to take it to court and risk quite a lot of money in legal fees. Your party didn't do that. They will get quite a big political kick out of this, I should think, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if their opinion poll rating improved over the next couple of weeks or a month or so. What effect do you think this might have on the election results in May, or do you think we'll have all forgotten about it by then?
So I've been listening to LBC over the last hour or so. I can hear how angry callers are that they were delayed, and it's right that these elections are going ahead. You keep saying credit where credit's due to reform. And, I'm inclined to agree with that. It was right to legally challenge this. The Lib Dems did a variety of things. So locally, we held petitions, we had demonstrations outside County Hall. And just last week, we tabled what's called a fatal motion, which was going to try and stop this secondary legislation. As it happened, reform's legal challenge is the thing that's kind of done the deal, if you like. But I do absolutely think that, it's rocket fuel for reform, and it's disastrous for Labour. It's totally humiliating for them. But the one thing I would say is that if you look at by-election results last year, throughout 2025, it was the Liberal Democrats that were standing up to reform. We won the most by-elections in 2025.
Do you think, though, that in the end, that the £63 million that the government is going to give these 30 councils, so just over £2 million each to be able to run these elections, is it a question of money, do you think? Is it a question of resources that they just need in the short term? Because I know a little bit about electoral registration departments in local councils. I mean, you can't just take any sort of Tom, Dick or Harry off the street to put in them to run elections. They're people that need to know what they're doing.
Yeah. So I've been rereading Steve Reed's letter from this afternoon, and this £63 million, I think it's more broadly compensation for the cost of reorganising. And currently, the cost of reorganising all these councils across the country is not being met by central government. And these are local authorities that are generally on their uppers financially, and they need to cover the cost of things like staff, where contracts have been outsourced, IT systems. There's absolutely masses to do, and I strongly suspect that this £63 million doesn't even touch the sides of what those costs are that those local authorities are facing to complete this unitarisation process.
Alison, thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Alison Bennett, Liberal Democrat MP for Mid Sussex. Well, you've heard the reaction from Reform UK, from the Liberal Democrats. As I say, the government wouldn't put up anyone to speak on this, which didn't massively surprise me, but there we are. 0345 6060 973. John says, Tory boy Iain is finally going full reform. That reform chat was just getting his tummy tickled. I don't know how many times I have to say this, but I'm not a Reform UK supporter. I won't be a Reform UK supporter. But I believe that if a political party does something that I think is right, I'll praise them for it. Believe it or not, I have actually praised Keir Starmer in the past for one or two things. Not that many, I'll admit, but there we go. Adam is in St Albans. Adam, hello.
Hi, good evening, Ian. Fabulous show, as always.
Well, thank you very much.
It does feel a very dictatorship situation, what you said earlier. And I think if other parties round and Keir was on the other side of the dispatch box, he would be screaming. But I feel that if Labour are really trashed in the May elections, and if Keir rodeo rider Starmer, the man that won't let go of power, really must call a general election. If Labour and he feels something for his country, then he must go to the country to go for an election on this. With 15 U-turns, 18 months in power, how many more car crashes can we suffer as a public?
Well, I have sympathy with that last bit, but the fact is, I mean, this is not an issue that I think is important enough to demand a general election on. And the fact is, we can demand a general election all we like, but we're not going to get one. He was elected with a massive majority. The people of this country put him in power. And as he said last week, he was elected to serve a 5-year term. Now, parliamentary arithmetic may change that, but that's the only way you're going to get a general election, for him to be defeated in a vote of no confidence. And that ain't going to happen.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. It does feel a very, very scorched earth situation. Some of the policies that are going through here with Labour, I feel a lot of people are thinking what more damage can actually be done when they know they're coming to the end of the term, they're going to come to the hangman, and they are just going to lose this. There's going to be a lot of upset over this, I feel, Ian, and I think a lot of people are aggrieved, and you're feeling that across the board. How is he going to turn it around? What silver bullet has he?
I've no idea. I think the general public have made up their minds about Keir Starmer now. They look at all of his legal qualifications, and they look at something like this and think, hang on a minute, mate, aren't you supposed to be the top barrister in the country? You were head of the Crown Prosecution Service, and yet you couldn't see that this was on legally dodgy ground. OK, he's not responsible for every bit of legal advice the governments get, but you might have thought he might have had an inclination that this was not going to end well.
This is telling you one major thing here, Ian, totally. 15 U-turns. The policies are not coming from Keir. He's seeing them at the end of the day in his red box, and this is where there's a lot of problems here. These are not just one or two situations.
I think
it's a worry.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. I don't know if you've read Tim Shipman's 3,500-word essay on the Spectator website. It's all about the events of the last couple of weeks in Keir Starmer and Labour. One of the things that he says in this essay is that Keir Starmer doesn't actually like policy. He's not interested particularly in policy.
I've read it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I thought, well, that is a very, very telling thing, because I can't remember in recent history a prime minister who wasn't interested in policy. Even the bad ones were interested. I mean, Liz Truss was very interested in policy. It was just unfortunate it was the wrong ones. But it is bizarre to have a prime minister that isn't interested in policy.
It's a great worry, possibly from think tanks, Whitehall, and the depths of government underneath. Perhaps Keir's not looking at any of this situation, but it's a worry for us all. And this is what I think Reform was saying about the root and branch recalculation of the whole governmental ministry down through Whitehall. I think we've seen it. I know Dominic Cummings said one or two things, Liz Truss somehow. I think even Gordon Brown said in 2005 there was a fundamental problem in there. They may have the levers of power, but if the levers of power are being pulled and the tracks are not being changed below and Whitehall, nothing will change. There will be no movement for us.
Thank you very much, Adam. Really good call. Several of you asking, what have I ever praised Starmer for? Well, I've praised him for aspects of his foreign policy. I think the way that he's dealt with Trump has been quite praiseworthy. I think one or two other things. I mean, I don't like the Chagos deal. I don't particularly like his approach to the EU, even though as a Brexiteer, I'm quite happy for us to get closer relations with the EU, but not at the risk of our national sovereignty. Somebody else says, what did you praise Boris for? I was very critical of Boris Johnson on many occasions, but I did praise him for the vaccine rollout. I can't. I think everybody surely would have to say that that part of COVID was handled well. Other bits, obviously, not so well. We'll come to more of your calls in a minute. If you live in one of these 30 areas where you weren't going to have council elections, but now you are, how do you feel about it? I mean, do you feel any sort of sense of relief? Any sense that, well, at least they've done the right thing in the end? I'm not sure we're going to have a lot of people sort of saying, oh, well, I think they should have carried on and not had the elections. But who knows? 0345 6060 973. It's 7:30 on LBC. Let's get the latest news headlines from Matt Hewitt.
Reform leader Nigel Farage says the abandonment of plans to delay 30 local elections is a victory for democracy. Ministers had cancelled May's votes in areas in England due to see local government reorganisation, but say they've received new legal advice. 2 teenagers have been found guilty of killing a man they thought was a paedophile. Alexander Cashford was lured to a beach on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent last August, where he was hit with rocks and a bottle. And Oscar-winning actor Robert Duvall has died at the age of 95. He starred in the first 2 Godfather films and Apocalypse Now, among others. LBC weather: showers this evening, wintry in northern Scotland, fading to leave clear spells tonight and a widespread frost. Lows between -3 and 7 degrees Celsius.
This is LBC. Big motor. This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
7:33. Anthony says, Iain, did I really hear you refer to yourself as a Brexiteer? Yes, you did, Anthony. I'm sorry if that gives you a shock, but there we are. Some of you are also shocked by my appearance if you're watching us on Global Player, the LBC YouTube channel or the LBC app. I forgot to put my tie on before I came into the studio. I do apologise for this gross negligence. Now, we'll come back to your calls on this decision today to cancel the cancellation of elections. But first, following the recent outrage about the use of AI bots to sexualise images of people against their consent and the government's fight with Elon Musk over it, the Prime Minister has now also vowed to crack down on the use of AI chatbots, which could cause harm to children. Keir Starmer spoke this morning about tackling the harm which phones in particular are causing to kids.
We have to break that habit to stop the addictive nature. We also need to do with AI bots. This is something relatively new, and we saw with Grok. Did you see the thing with Grok just the other week? An AI bot that allowed you to instruct it to undress people. And it did. It was disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And we went into battle on that because I thought this is not good enough. We went into battle We made the necessary steps. We threatened action. And we won that battle in relation to Grok, but we've got to do it with all AI bots, and we will do it. And we can do that by amending some of the legislation that we've already got in place.
Well, let's see how realistic that is with Hannah Swirsky, Head of Policy and Public Affairs at the Internet Watch Foundation. Hannah, very good evening. How possible is that to regulate bots and chatbots in the way that Keir Starmer was just outlining there?
Well, we're really pleased actually to hear this from the Prime Minister, and we welcome the commitments by the government to keep children safe and particularly plug loopholes in current laws. So the Online Safety Act does to some extent cover chatbots, but only if they are either user-to-user services or, for example, if they create pornographic content. So there is already some legislation in place, but it's clearly not enough. And we feel that actually it would be very positive if they bring in further laws to include all chatbots in scope of the Online Safety Act.
Isn't the problem that technology is always 3 steps ahead of legislation, and legislation can plug existing holes, but it can never really anticipate what's going to be happening in 3, 5, 10 years' time, or it's very rare that that happens. Do we just have to accept that?
I think it's a really good point, and actually the fact that the government is continuing to do more is positive. You know, there is always going to be something new. When we were working on the Online Safety Act, when it was a bill, no one really talked about AI. Chatbots was not a thing. So certainly there does need to be an iterative approach here. But I would say that that's not a reason not to do something. It just means that we need to be aware, and the government needs to be ready to act continuously on these issues.
A couple of years ago, there were several examples of teenagers who had taken their own lives as a result of sort of conversations with these chatbots. I mean, obviously, this is not a normal thing, but you would have thought the companies behind them would have already voluntarily taken measures to make sure that a chatbot could not possibly either inform a young person, or indeed anybody, about how they could take their own lives, or to sort of just react in a responsible manner. Why haven't they done this off their own bat?
Certainly, I think it's a very good question. And this is why we need to mandate requirements on companies to make their platforms safe by design and not wait until these harms occur. I think really it is down to the companies that need to be required to do something about it. There are measures that are technically feasible, they're workable. You know, for example, we know from AI companies that we at the Internet Watch Foundation work with that you can put in measures to prevent your platform being used to generate child sexual abuse material, for example. You can stop the spread of this material online, but we need the companies to do this first of all and not wait until the harms happen.
Hannah, thank you very much. That's Hannah Swirsky from the Internet Watch Foundation. Let me tell you who's on Cross Question from 8. We have Kirsty Buchanan, political news editor of the Daily Telegraph, former advisor to Theresa May. Sebastian Salak, Labour local councillor, who's also a former political journalist. Emma Best, deputy leader of the Conservatives in the London Assembly and also a local councillor, bizarrely on the same local council as Sebastian Salak. And Rachel Shabby, journalist, writer and broadcaster. They'll be here from 8 to answer your questions. Well, let's go back to your calls. Joe's in Brighton. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Ian. It's the original Joe. Good to speak to you again.
Hi. What would you like to say?
I reckon Restore Britain has got the advantage. I don't think it's going to be a great day for reform. They might have won, but Restore Britain seems to have the support growing quicker than any other party. So I think Nigel Farage is going to be a little bit disappointed in May.
Well, I suspect that 99% of the people listening to this programme have never heard of Restore Britain. Just explain who it is, what it is.
Rupert Lowe, former Reform MP, very good on the committee. I'm not a supporter of Restore Britain, but his videos have touched me, even though I'm a Keir Starmer fan. He said some really poignant things in his video, and you can see he's not in it for the accolades and the money. With the reform, they have turned back on many policies, just like Labour. And Boris, 38 U-turns when Boris was in power, apparently. That's what some political person said on LBC last week, the week before. So, I mean, it's 14 years of Conservative A CEO takes 6 years to turn around a company. Look at the lady who done John Lewis, and look at the guy who turned around Marks and Spencer. How can you expect 14 years of the civil service being wrecked? Lots of events happening in London where police stations are not next to it anymore. They're having to travel 20 miles away. Same as in Somerset.
Who shut those police stations in London?
Well, it started with Theresa May and then Sadiq Khan.
Yeah,
and before that, we had 5 stations closed by Boris Johnson. So, everyone's guilty, and you just can't turn around a big PLC company within 18 months.
No, but so many of these U-turns are unforced errors, like this one today, for example. They didn't have to do that.
That's true, but, to be honest, they said Tony Blair's government was a bit of a shamble in the first year. And I heard other Conservative governments were a bit of a shambles because sometimes they don't click with the civil service. And all what Reform are trying to say is we're going to copy the Project 25 in America. And I reckon no civil service person is going to do what they say. Europe is not going to talk to someone who always insulted them in the European Parliament. People voting for Reform. You're voting for the country to get worse. Europe will not work with us with Nigel Farage. You're not being realistic. You can, as Nick Abbott said, you can walk into the LBC staff meeting room with his socks with the British flag. It means nothing. He's just playing you. He's just a lobbyist for American companies, as he said during the Senate last year. I represent American companies. He's a lobbyist company. He's not a party. They're just going to bring in all the failing policies of Trump and make American companies take over our most important companies. And that's all what's going to happen. The same thing Margaret Thatcher did in the bit, selling all our services to different countries, and that's it.
Well, she
really.
didn't actually. She actually sold the different companies to shareholders in this country. So that's a bit of a gross mischaracterization. But just going back to what you said about Restore Britain, Joshua has texted in to say, how can you say that 99% of your callers won't know who Restore are? Condescending. They're already 10% in the first poll. Read up and inform yourself. I'm shocked, says Joshua. Well, stop clutching those pearls, Joshua, is all I can say, because I did see that poll. And they reckon that Rupert Lowe is 14-1 to be the next Prime Minister, which I find utterly bizarre. This poll, if it's the one that I'm thinking of, was operated by a company that I've vaguely heard of, but only very vaguely. I'd love to know what the methodology was for that. But I mean, if you have Reform UK, Advance UK under Ben Habib, and now this new Restore Britain under Rupert Lowe. I mean, that's three political parties on the hard right of British politics. I mean, that is not going to lead anywhere until they unite.
They're merging. Advance UK and Restore Britain are going to merge.
Oh, are they?
Yeah. Ben Habib said it on a release over the weekend. I mean, listen here. I think he's really likeable, Rupert Lowe. I heard a lot of negative things about him, and then I watched that video. It's very touching. He's got a way. I can see why Elon Musk supports him over Nigel Farage. He comes over very warm. He comes over like it's not about his own voice. I mean, even if you're you've just got to watch it. It's just incredible.
I'll try to get him on the programme in the next couple of weeks because I've never interviewed him. I don't know him at all. All I know of him was that he was chairman of Southampton Football Club and wasn't very popular with Southampton fans. I don't think. He
might not be popular, but the way he phrases his words, he starts by going to his farm, saying, this is one of my life. You're a farmer, so you understand. He says, we don't worry about politics. We don't worry. We just get up and do our farming thing. So when it begins to touch your life, then I think he's a genuine person, Rupert Lowe. I wanted to dislike him, but you can't. He's very warm. He's very genuine. And he doesn't look like someone who's going to be working on behalf of American companies. And you're wrong, Ian, by the way. Fujitsu was sold to Japan. And Cadbury's was sold to Kraft. All these key important companies.
Hang on a second. They weren't privatised. They're private sector companies.
Yeah, but the government can stop those mergers.
Why would a government, without any reason, step in to stop a foreign company buying a British company? Because then you would have retaliatory action. Because believe it or not, Britain owns more American companies than any other country in the world. So if you want retaliatory action, fine, go ahead and do that.
Yeah, you're right. We used to own Westinghouse. I don't know if we still own Westinghouse, and we owned quite a few of the finance companies. But you know, we need manufacturing. That's why we've got this shortage of jobs for graduates and apprentices are growing, but there's not enough spaces. And the problem we have now, we do have to kind of work with China and hope that they open a head office here or so called, because obviously the manufacturing.
You see, this is what gets me. Sort of, you really rail against American companies, but you're quite happy to have the Chinese Communist Party involved in our economy. I don't get that at all.
No, let me explain. I don't mind Chinese company having a head office here, yeah? But I don't want American companies to... Look what Cadbury's happened to Cadbury's. It was... this is going to make you laugh, Ian. When Cadbury's were sold, it was a milk and a half. Now they've taken out so much chocolate, it tastes like icing sugar. And the same happened.
I know.
We sell
I agree with you. I think I resent the fact that Cadbury's cream eggs are a fraction of the size that they used to be. I totally get you. But that means that you and I don't buy Cadbury's products as much. Well, in fact, I don't buy them at all because I mustn't, because I'm a diabetic. But look, commercial companies only exist at the pleasure of their customers. And if the customers don't like their products, they don't buy them and they go out of business. And I agree, if Cadbury went out of business, that would be an absolute crying shame. But I do have to correct you on one thing, Joe. Ben Habib has not said that he's merging with Advanced UK. He said he's considering a merger.
Okay. Oh, by the way, Ian, can I tell you about quickly one of my friend's companies, what he's launching?
No, because we're way over time before we have to go to a break. Apologies, Joe, but you've had a good crack, I think. Right, we'll come to more of your calls in a moment. It's 7:46. Let's take a break.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
We're going to be unpacking what actually went on with Labour Together and their investigation into top journalists. And we'll be asking whether Pam Bondi is really trying to cover up of the Epstein files.
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Dale on LBC.
7:49 on LBC. Somebody here, Stu, says, I prefer China to America. At least the Chinese have morals. I'll just let that one sink in for a few moments. Peter is on Greater Merseyside. I've never heard of something called Greater Merseyside, Peter. Sorry, what? Greasby.
Hello, Ian. Thanks for taking my call. No, it's not. I think there's a bit of probably a bit of mistaken on it. It's
I misread it.
In Merseyside.
Okay. What would you like to say?
Greasby. Yeah, it's okay. It's a Viking stronghold. It's okay. But thanks for taking the call, Ian. No, I've been listening with interest to the discussion about the government's action today, and I quite agree. It's been another unforced error by the government. When I was listening to it on the news, it struck me straight away as if they found new legal instructions on why it couldn't happen. They should have been able to find that before they stated it wasn't going to happen. Does that make sense, Ian?
I totally agree with you.
They should have known that before, but just in terms of the but sort of in terms of the local elections in general, it is my understanding that the government never asked the councils to suspend them. And I use the word suspend, not cancel. It's just a bit of pedantics with myself. But the councils asked the government, can we do it? And the government said yes. And okay, so
no,
that's the sort of pedantics.
That's not what happened.
What I get frustrated with today, is it not?
No. What happened was that the government.
I was under the impression.
I think there's a delay on this line, but the government said to these councils, we're going to give you the opportunity of cancelling them, knowing full well that most of them would actually say, oh, yes, please. And, of course, that's exactly what happened.
Right. I see. Okay, well, I stand corrected on that. I shortened that down. I thought it was something different. But what I'm watching from this debate and argument at the moment across the country is it seems to be so easy in this country today to get people really riled up, angry, and with really strong opinions on something that they really didn't care about yesterday. And the reason I say that, I base it on, I had a quick look at the weekend on the government's statistics for elections and local elections on voter turnout. And historically, the voter turnout for local elections all across England anyway is generally between 30 and 40%. Sometimes it went up to about 47%, but that was unusual. So what that tells me is between 60 and 70% of any local area, the voting population couldn't care whether they had an election or not. But when you tell them you can't, all of a sudden they get angry about it. It just seems to be a bit hypocritical. It's like they're finding ways to get people angry rather than trying to sort out problems that's in front of them. Am I making any sense with that?
Well, I think there is on a lot of occasions now, people do get very angry, and it's largely whipped up by social media. I think you make an interesting point about local election turnout, and you're right. I mean, actually, in a lot of areas, it's under 30%. But if you are threatening to take away people's vote, they naturally get angry about it, even if they don't always use their vote, because they know that as a key part of democracy is to actually be able to have a vote. It's also a key part of democracy not to use your vote if you so choose. Now, I hate it when I hear people say, oh, I'm not going to vote, because I think you almost deny yourself an opportunity to criticise what happens if you don't actually have a vote. But Peter, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to James, who's in Ayr. James, hi.
Oh, hello there. Nice to talk to you again. I'm not angry. I'm going to stay nice and calm. I agree, by the way, the last chap from Merseyside about voter turnout, which I think is a real problem. The next thing I want to talk about Keir Starmer is I don't really have any problem with U-turns. I like a government that listens to people and accept there are some unforced errors. But if you see her making a mistake and change your mind, I don't think that's a sign of weakness. I mean, I think that's responding to, the electorate. Some people will say, well, it shows no leadership, but I like people who listen to the people, if you know what I mean. I don't know what you think about that.
No, I understand exactly what you mean, and I think there are occasions when governments do make a U-turn and it is for the best. But if you do it too often, and people say, oh, well, Boris Johnson made more U-turns than Keir Starmer. Well, Boris Johnson made a lot of U-turns on policy during COVID, which people are counting on this. And I think, well, every government would have done that. And I don't say that to defend Boris Johnson, but I think in the first 18 months of a government, it does seem to be a government that lacks conviction. It seems to sort of go with the prevailing wind. It's not. Do you remember Tony Benn used to say, well, he divides politicians into two camps, those who are signposts and those who are weather vanes.
Yeah.
And this government is full of weather vanes. And sometimes it's not right to just go with public opinion. Public opinion can be wrong. And that is a case where a prime minister who has strong convictions sometimes needs to stick to those convictions and take the political fallout from that rather than bend to what they think will be popular.
Okay, well, that brings me on to the last thing I wanted to talk about. In terms of Restore Britain, I've never heard of them. But you say that public opinion can be wrong, and I think it was wrong. I think it was wrong in 2016 with Brexit. And I know that Restore Britain isn't about restoring the UK to the European Union. And so I'm going to support, I think, the only party that I understand is going to actually try and take the UK back into Europe. And I believe that, although I'm not certain, but I believe that's part of the Liberal Party policy, because I think that Brexit could almost permanently break this country, and I think if Reform get elected, I think they could finish the job off. And I say that without any anger. It's just how I see it. I know you disagree. I know you're a Brexiteer, but I just think it's just not worked. I really, really think it's not worked. And I think a lot of the country's economic woes stem from that decision. I know there are other factors at play, and I know there are problems in other European countries, but I really think we need to get back into the common market, the unified market.
If you remember, Joe Swinson fought the 2019 election on going back into the European Union and suffered a catastrophic result. And I don't think that is official Lib Dem policy. I think there are many people in the Lib Dems who would like it to be. And I think I said last week, I've been very surprised that there hasn't been. There is apparently an organisation called Rejoin EU, but it's made no traction whatsoever. And yet, if I was to believe my social media feeds, whenever I say anything that is sort of pro-Brexit, it is infested by people who, use utterly ridiculous arguments as to why we should go back in. There is an argument for going back in. I completely accept that. I don't agree with it, but I accept it. But it doesn't seem to have caught a tidal wave of public opinion yet.
Can I just say very, very lastly, Ian, I know you're a Conservative supporter, and that's fine. I'm not, but I think the Conservative Party lost voters because of the EU exit. I think there are people, particularly in affluent parts of England, who are very pro-EU. And so I think, and this is not talked about much, I think the Conservative Party did lose support from pro-EU voters. Conservative voters.
Well, of course it did.
Very supportive of the EU.
Of course it did.
And so, and that's an issue that never gets talked much about.
Well, we have talked about it on the show because why do you think the Liberal Democrats won all of those seats across the south of England? Now, that was partly because Reform took votes away from the Conservatives on the other side. But let's not forget, 3 years after the Brexit referendum, Boris Johnson got an 80-seat majority. So when you say the Conservatives lost support, well, they certainly have in the 2024 election. You're absolutely right. How much of that was down to the Brexit referendum, I'm not wholly sure. But James, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Now, coming up in the next hour, it's Monday's Cross Question. On the panel, joining me in a moment, Kirsty Buchanan, political news editor of the Daily Telegraph, Sebastian Salek, Labour councillor, former political journalist, Emma Best, deputy leader of the Conservatives on the London Assembly, and Rachel Shabby, the journalist, writer and broadcaster. I want to make Cross Question a little different this week because Parliament is in recess. Obviously, there is going to be political news, but if you've got some slightly idiosyncratic questions, maybe about morality, maybe about ethics, maybe about business, that aren't necessarily core political or foreign political questions, we'd love to hear from you. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call.
On your radio, on the LBC app. And
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, elections across 30 councils will go ahead this May after the government U-turned over a plan to postpone them. Local Government Secretary Steve Reed says the decision was taken following recent legal advice after a challenge by Reform UK. The government has agreed to pay the party's court costs, which it's understood could run to six figures. The party leader Nigel Farage claims it's a victory for democracy.
In some cases, this would have been the second year in a row that people who are paying their council tax would have been denied the chance to vote. So that's why we took them to the High Court. We were due there this Thursday. They've caved, they've collapsed. It's a victory for reform.
Two teenagers have been found guilty of killing a man they accused of being a paedophile. A 16-year-old girl and a 15-year-old boy have been convicted of the manslaughter of Alexander Cashford last August on the Isle of Sheppey. Detective Chief Inspector Neil Kimberis is from Kent Police.
He'd collapsed at that point. And then our significant witness in this case sees the defendant throwing rocks at him. One of those hit him in the back of the head and kicking him with some force.
The Prime Minister's promised to act in months, not years, to protect young people from addictive social media platforms. The crackdown will include measures to eliminate illegal content created by artificial intelligence. Meanwhile, a consultation over an Australia-style social media ban for children begins next month. Some campaigners have called for big tech firms to be regulated like banks. The Oscar-winning actor Robert Duvall has died at the age of 95. He was best known for his roles in Apocalypse Now and The Godfather.
And nobody has ever gunned down a New York police captain, never. It would be disastrous. All the five families would come after you, Sonny. The Corleone family would be outcast.
His wife paid tribute for his love of characters, a great meal, and holding court. Barack Obama has said aliens are real, but he hasn't seen any, and they're not being kept at the notorious Area 51 site. He later posted on social media, adding that statistically there probably is life out there, but he stressed he saw no evidence of extraterrestrial activity when he was president. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 27 points at 10,473. The pound buys $1.36 and €1.15. LBC weather: showers this evening will fade to leave clear spells tonight, and there's widespread frost. A warning of snow in northern Scotland and ice for many northern and eastern parts. A low of -3 degrees Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Chris Barrow.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, very good evening. Welcome to Monday's Cross Question. I'm Iain Dale. It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. On the panel with me, to my left, Rachel Shabby, journalist, writer and broadcaster. To her left, Kirsty Buchanan, political news editor of the Daily Telegraph, former advisor to Theresa May. To my right, Emma Best, who's deputy leader of the Conservatives on the London Assembly, and Sebastian Sullock, who's a Labour councillor and a former political journalist. And Emma and Sebastian are both on the same London council, Waltham Forest, which is where I used to live, so I feel we have a bond because of that. Right, we're going to take your questions on 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp on that number, you can text 84850, and of course you can watch us on the LBC YouTube channel, the LBC app and Global Player.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
We have a text question here from Scott in West Hampstead, who says, does the Labour government deserve an entry in the Guinness Book of Records for the biggest number of U-turns made over the shortest period of time by any government in British history? Not sure that's necessarily totally accurate, but Sebastian Sullock.
So my big bug there is that these aren't all U-turns. A U-turn is when you say one thing and you do the opposite. And a lot of this has been a tempering of the existing decision. So take winter fuel, for example. Came in at a certain level, that level changed. And I think we probably ended up in the right place, and you've got a bit of flexibility and you've got a government that's listening to people. What's happening now, though, is more unfortunate. We are seeing U-turn after U-turn. I'm quite concerned about the latest one. It does seem like it might have been avoidable. I say that from the comfortable environs of a TV and radio studio here rather than the cut and thrust of Westminster. But you would have thought that those legal inquiries would have been made earlier on and this whole thing could have been avoided.
It's almost like they need somebody who's like one of the nation's top lawyers as Prime Minister.
Well, he's got enough else to be thinking about, hasn't he?
But do you feel that the government have now got this reputation for being a U-turning government? Just as, Margaret Thatcher made a great virtue out of not doing U-turns, even though she did do some. But they've almost sort of slipped by without a lot of media notice. Whereas here, every time there's a U-turn, people say, oh, well, I know what the next one's going to be like. People are saying tonight, oh, it'll be Chagos next.
Well, I think they probably do have a reputation. Whether it's warranted or not is another question. As I say, a lot of these are just adjustments to an existing policy, and often quite sensible ones as well. Where they end up landing is probably where they should have been in the first place. So maybe an unfair reputation, but certainly in the interest of Starmer to get away from that as much as he can. When he says no more U-turns, I really hope that can be the truth.
OK, Emma?
Yeah, when he says no more U-turns, I really don't believe him. I mean, that was a good clutch, Sebastian, but we can all see what's happening. And if the lady wasn't for turning, this man is spinning. But the really damaging thing is that it is just leaving the leadership of the UK in an absolute place of turmoil, because we need some direction on where we're going. If we commit to something, we have to commit to it. The markets have to know where we're going. Businesses have to know where we're going. In the education sector, people need to know where we're going. Everybody needs to know where we're going. And if everybody expects that at the drop of the hat, the government's going to U-turn and tell you something next week, then we can't make any plans. Even if the decisions, which some of them have been, are really poor, you at least need to plan for what you're expecting. And when that changes week on week on week, that uncertainty is actually killing us.
Isn't it better, though, to when you, even if you didn't recognise at the beginning that this was going to be controversial, isn't it better sometimes to make an adjustment or do a complete U-turn?
It's better to actually think through these policies. Who the hell is in number 10? When you're looking at things like the business rates on the hospitality industry, who didn't work out that that was going to close almost every pub in the UK? When you're looking at winter fuel allowance...
You wouldn't want to exaggerate.
If you speak to the hospital, it would have at the rates it was initially suggested. It would have closed almost every pub in the UK. Nobody could keep up with that. You look at the fact that we've already got only 1 in 3 pubs at the moment making a profit. Imagine what would have happened with those rates coming in. Then you look at the winter fuel allowance, to not realise where the threshold was and the amount of poorly paid pensioners you were taking that away from before that came in. How did we get to that stage? That's my real question: is how are these things getting to the dispatch box? It seems that they get there, and to their credit, be it Keir, be it Rachel, turn around and say, how the hell why am I announcing this? And they then realise and have to backtrack. But I don't know how it's getting to that point in the first place. Who is making these policies?
Do you not think, Sebastian, that is at the core of this, that the government came in without really knowing what it was about, having not done the preparatory work? Tim Shipman's article, I don't know if you saw it in The Spectator this week, he says that Keir Starmer's actually not that interested in policy. And if you have a Prime Minister that isn't interested in policy, that may well be at the root of this.
I mean, maybe there's a grain of truth to that, but we have to look at the backdrop to this, which is it's probably the hardest time in living memory to run this country. We've seen Tory leader after Tory leader spin out of control, and I think Labour is now coming with a bit of humility and realising why that might have happened. You've got all this talk of the blob, and look, again, you can argue about to what extent is the civil service getting on and doing its thing, regardless of what politicians want. But this is a country that is increasingly becoming ungovernable.
Rachel?
I actually agree with you. Ta-da!
Which bit?
I know. I was so shocked myself. Look, this government came in with no policy. There is no policy. Their policy was purge the left and we're the grown-ups, we're the sensibles, and we need to be back in charge. By the way, Keir Starmer is a man who U-turned from the beginning, conned the Labour membership into thinking that he was some kind of continuity Corbyn in terms of the 10 pledges, and then dumped all of them as soon as he was in office. So he came...
Be fair. Morgan McSweeney dumped them.
Okay, well, ouch. But you're right, and that's a worse burn. But yeah, so the man was... The whole leadership was premised on deceit from the beginning. But the problem is that they do not have any policy. They do not have the policy that this country so desperately needs. And people can see it. People can see there's absolute no improvement in, cost of living and all the things that people are struggling with. So the more we hear all these excuses like, oh, being in charge is difficult, boo-hoo-hoo, the more frustrated people are getting. The more they're pushed into radical parties like Reform.
Are you being totally fundamentally fair, though?
Yes, of course. I'm always fair.
Well, because inflation is coming down now. They've had 6 interest rate cuts. Now, we can argue the toss as to, well, that's the Bank of England rather than Labour. But, I mean, the cost of living from that point of view is coming down.
But people are not feeling that benefit. And there's so many, this kind of crisis where you have endless stagnation and people's cost of living standards not going up and people feeling that pinch. This scale requires a big scale joined up policy intervention.
But Rachel, that takes time.
And the right wing of the party that is now factionally ruling the party has an empty cupboard when it comes to policy. There is no policy.
That's not true at all. You've seen a raft of legislation come in from day one. Come on, you only have to look at what's going on in Parliament to see what's going on, whether it's tax on private schools, whether it's free school meals, whether it's... there was so much going on. And you say that Keir Starmer changed his mind or misled the party. Well, he said he was going to tax the rich. He has, and he's made all of these promises. Oh, come on. You've got tax on private jets, you've got tax on private schools, you've got non-doms abolished, you've got all of these piecemeal change to tax the rich, which is what he said he would do, and he's followed through on it. Same with nationalising industry. We've got the railways going back into public ownership. It's a good Labour policy, and it's what he stood on when he was going to be Labour leader. So he is following through on his promises.
Okay, well, I realise you have to say that.
I say it because I believe it. I don't have to say anything.
You believe it.
Of course I believe it.
Hang on.
On this policy, no?
Look, I think that one of the problems that they had was that they were so busy preparing to get into government, they didn't prepare for what they were going to do in government. And back to Tim Shipman's brilliant piece about analysing where it all went so horribly wrong, that the kind of original sin here, if you like, was appointing Sue Gray as Chief of Staff. I think there was too much expectation that because she had been around government, she was a senior civil servant, never run a department, but that she was going to sort of roll out a programme of change. And they got in there to find out that the 100-day grid of announcements and plans was completely empty. So they were already on the back foot. When she left, she was replaced by Morgan McSweeney. Morgan McSweeney is a campaigner. He's a political campaigner. He is not used to, nor is he up to the job of running Downing Street. And I think that is some of the problem that we've seen. Now, I should be happy that we've had 2 recent U-turns. The Telegraph campaigned against the tax raid on pubs, and we also campaigned against this cancelling of local democracy, which is depriving 4.5 million people of the right to vote. But what it does all speak to, we have 15 U-turns now, 14, 15 U-turns here. And when you have a Prime Minister that doesn't have what Tony Blair used to call that irreducible core, doesn't have a vision, doesn't have a narrative thing, and you have a succession of U-turns, you get into the impression of a government that is buffeted by events, that doesn't have a clear sense of where it wants to take us. And you've replaced, frankly, the chaos of the latter years of Conservative government with the chaos of 19 months of Labour rule, but it's never really quite got to grips with the essence of government.
Let's bring in a follow-up question here from Jamie in York. Do you think Steve Reed should resign? Steve Reed is the Communities and Local Government Secretary, and of course it was his department that announced this U-turn on the elections today, although I noticed he sort of got his deputy to do the dirty work, Matthew Pennycook, rather than take responsibility himself. Brief answers on this, Rachel?
Should he resign? Yeah. I mean, should he resign? It was a really bad move. But I think, where does the buck stop with all of this? You know, who's got to take ultimate responsibility for it? And the thing is about this move of trying to prevent these elections is that it's not even a matter of, like, being completely hapless and having no political sensibility. Like, how did you not realise that would be viewed as grossly undemocratic? It's just basic haplessness at this stage.
And it's put rocket boosters under reform.
Oh, exactly. It's given a win to reform. But my point is that you could take someone off the street and say to them, do you think depriving 4.5 million people of their chance to vote in a local election is a good idea?
Even though only 20% of them do.
But still, just the principle of it, people would be opposed to on democratic terms. It's a no-brainer. And the idea that, again, Starmer couldn't see this coming, that's on him.
Well, not only is it a political no-brainer, it's also illegal, is what it appears to be now. Now, Section 87, I'm not going to bore everybody too much about this, under the Local Government Act, gives ministers the right to cancel elections only in extremis. I think the Tories did it a couple of times during COVID. Now, saying that you need to do this because you're going through local government reorganisation is not a kind of in extremis thing. And more importantly, he delegated the decision-making ultimately down to councils, which is unlawful. So what appears to have happened here is Reform were 3 days away from a judicial review. I think they've looked at the Reform case. They've asked their lawyers to go back at MHCLG and have another look at it and thought, actually, we can't win this. This is a slam dunk, completely unlawful set of decisions. And what we want from the Telegraph now is not only, obviously, we welcome the U-turn that they've had, the welcome that these elections are going to go ahead, but we've got to have this clause removed from the Local Government Act. It's a very obscure clause. It gives ministers extraordinary powers, and if this is how they're going to wield them, best that we don't have this fiasco again.
So should he resign?
I think the simple answer is yes. I think there's quite a few calls for him to resign. If I'd cost taxpayers £63 million because I had gone ahead with something that was politically unsustainable and unlawful, yeah, I think I would probably be expected to resign, sure.
And how much did prescribing Palestine Action as a terror group cost, by the way?
We may come on to that. Emma?
I feel a little bit like not my monkey, not my circus. But I mean, when you and it comes a bit, it comes a little bit back to the point I was making, right? Is should Steve Reid resign? Well, probably, because this is a catastrophic failure. But again, it comes back to my earlier point of how are things getting to this stage? I mean, you know, our Prime Minister was one of the top lawyers, the top lawyer in the country at one point. And we've got to the point where he's getting taken to court and losing and costing, well, by reform and costing the country millions of pounds. So how did we get here? Because even if Steve Reid does resign, it doesn't stop us getting into these positions.
Sebastian.
Thrilling though it may be to come on the radio and call for someone's resignation, I am not going to follow suit. He's a very good operator. He's a very good communicator. He's an asset to the cabinet. Yes, this was a mess up. Yes, it's regrettable. But if we're going to talk about allegations of divine democracy, then nobody gets away scot-free. Reform, you've got, 4 MPs now who've crossed the floor and aren't facing by-elections. The Tories brought in voter ID and disenfranchised many.
There's no constitutional
rule, but there's a very strong moral case for it. So everybody is taking their turn when it suits them to dodge democracy, and I would be very wary of anybody who is making accusations towards Labour, because no one is clean here.
Democracy then.
No, what I'm saying is if you're going to criticise Labour of that, you better make sure you have your own house in order.
I'm just trying to think of the Conservative MPs that have defected to Labour over the years. Can't remember any of them having by-elections.
And they should have done. I think it's the right thing to do from whatever party you come from and to whatever party you go to.
Right, more questions from you. 0345 6060 973. It's 17 minutes past 8.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
This is taxation without representation.
Straight to the point.
Do you get giddy with all these U-turns?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
It's lucky he gets up in the morning, really, isn't it?
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC.
This year.
Ask Question with Iain Dale. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
19 minutes past 8. With us on the panel, Kirsty Buchanan from the Daily Telegraph, Sebastian Sullock, who's a Labour councillor, Emma Best, Deputy Leader of the Conservatives on the London Assembly, and Rachel Shabby, journalist, writer and broadcaster. Andrew says, is the fact that we now have the highest youth unemployment figure in Europe, is that really true? Due to the advent of AI? Or is it because the chickens are now coming home to roost as a result of the government's minimum wage rises, employers' NI rises, and the Employment Rights Bill, which employers had warned would all seriously impact employment? Now, new stats from the OECD have shown that Britain's unemployment rate for 18 to 24-year-olds rose to 15.3% in the final 3 months of last year, compared with 15% across the EU. I'm sure I've seen statistics recently. It shows that Spain has a youth unemployment rate of something like 22%, but that may be out of date. Kirsty?
I think some of it is exacerbated by AI, which is making it much harder to get entry-level jobs. But some of it is exacerbated by the fact that Rachel Reeves has made it much more expensive for employers to take on younger people. Once you've lowered the threshold and raised national insurance contributions for employers, it just becomes much more difficult to get the younger people onto the market. So I think that is the fundamental problem. And when we started to see that increase, I think, in youth unemployment, it flows off the back of, fundamentally, of NI. The problem with it, of course, is that what will happen is that AI will... it flows off the back of the tax rise, but the problem is AI will exacerbate this now and make it much more difficult. And I was reading at the weekend that quite a lot of graduates now are turning to trades. My son, who didn't do very well at school, turned around to me and he said, "Mum, you're not going to be very pleased with me. I'm going to go and do carpentry at college." And I said, that might be the most sensible thing that's ever come out of your mouth. Because, if you go now to get a degree... Yep. There's no such thing as a degree premium anymore. If you're lucky, you've got a £27,000 debt hanging over your head. That can end up being infinitely higher, and let's not get into the interest rates of Plan 2 student loans. So you're saddled with an awful debt. There's no graduate premium.
So this isn't just a case of youth unemployment, it's actually graduate unemployment.
I think a lot of it is graduate unemployment. Yeah. I can tell you anecdotally from my son and my friends, they are crying out for plumbers, electricians, those sorts of apprenticeships. There's no problem getting that kind of work and getting in at kind of apprenticeship level. But when you're talking about kind of white collar work, which is, consultancies, law firms, surveyors, all that kind of stuff. Why am I hiring five junior posts when I can hire one and get them trained up on AI and get them to brief AI properly? It's just, it's an exacerbating problem by AI, but what's really caused it is this government's made it much more difficult and more expensive to hire people.
Rachel?
I think that the increase to national insurance contributions from employers is really regressive. It's a regressive way to raise tax, and I don't think Labour should have done that. I think it was a big mistake. I would rather Labour focused on taxing unearned income and try to tackle inequalities that way. I feel really bad for people who are just starting out in the labour market, in the workplace. It's so much harder now. You're absolutely right. The idea of being saddled with that level of student debt, eye-watering, and I never had to deal with that when I got a degree, and it's horrendous that people are saddled with that level of debt.
And of course, if your parents are wealthy, they can pay off that $27,000 immediately. Right, but it's even more aggressive than it is at first.
It's immediately disadvantages the already disadvantaged. I just think that there needs to be so much more focus on generating those entry-level jobs, whether there's more vocational training, whether there's more greening the economy so that there's more of these actually good green jobs in a green economy. That's something that would instantly create tens of thousands of those kind of jobs. So I do think there should be a lot more focus on this. And if we don't focus on it now, not only is it going to be appalling for young people now, but fast forward decades, and what have we got? It's just a disaster.
Emma?
Yeah, I think Andrew's kind of answered his own question there. All those things are correct, right? But if you look at, for example, the hospitality industry, 100,000 jobs lost since Rachel Reeves' budget. That's not because of AI. We don't have, RoboCop things, serving drinks in pubs, or
Not yet.
And we're not quite there. So that is entirely of our own government's fault.
But we do have QR codes, which mean that they have to employ fewer waiting staff.
Well, not necessarily, because they still need to bring them out to the tables. That's not the contributing factor.
They're there for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, it might make it easier at the bar, but it's not actually meaning you're understaffed at a bar.
Well, okay.
But I think that if you come, though, onto the point around AI and graduate jobs, we do need a massive, massive revolution where we adapt to this. It's kind of going back to the advent of the computer, right, in offices. And you think about all the secretarial work that changed then when suddenly Excel does things that, people would do in a day. So we need to have that sort of revolution, understand AI. And we're at this difficult transition space. But, I mean, to say something positive, if we manage this correctly, I think for the future generations, new jobs will emerge. There'll be new ways in which we use AI, manipulate AI, and I do think those jobs that are looking like they're being phased out for being too junior and replaced by AI, they will come back, because there will be a way in which we develop which will help that. But to come back to the more, the jobs around hospitality, things that we're doing practically, of course, all these things that the government have introduced are affecting our job losses, and they are especially affecting the youth unemployment, which I think is up to 7 million now.
Sebastian?
There are two things that are true. Youth unemployment is a big issue, but we should take it in context. It's only outpacing the EU because the EU youth unemployment rate is coming down massively. We saw unemployment rates among young people of above 50% in countries like Greece, countries like Spain just a few years ago. If I were a young person today entering the workforce, I would be doing one of two things. I would either go down the trades route, because I say this as a man who's currently refurbishing a house. If you can pick up the phone, string a sentence together and turn up on time, you're already a top 1% performer. Or I'd be taking advantage of AI. We live in a world now where you can message anybody online. You can create digital goods and services that have no marginal cost of reproduction. It has never been easier to start a business that serves the world. And there's a huge opportunity there. But sadly, compared to the US at least, and it's one of the few things I think America does better than us, we don't have that entrepreneurial mindset where it is in our genes to go out and get it.
OK, let's take a follow-up call on this subject from Robbie in Chelmsford. Robbie, hi.
Hi, evening all. Just to broaden things out a bit, do you think it's a moral stain in our country how badly young people have been let down in general by the political class in the last few generations? And what tangible thing could be done to restore the social contract with the next generation?
Wow, that's a deep question, which you all have 4 minutes to answer. Kirsty?
I could not agree more. I have no understanding why we don't have a whole youth strategy. And I completely understand why Gen Z or Z or whatever we're supposed to call them are so damn angry. You're never going to get a house. We're burning their planet. The chances of a job are pretty small, and we've saddled them with all sorts of debt just for the simple job of trying to educate themselves and have a better chance at being on the jobs market. So I don't, housing is beyond the pale. Capitalism isn't working for them anymore. Increasingly, democracy is not working for them anymore. Frankly, I'm amazed they haven't just completely checked out. And obviously, in a more mobile market, they're moving, increasingly moving abroad for jobs abroad. So, look, this is a kind of bugbear of mine. I think that any government should have a whole youth strategy to get people into the houses that they need, into the jobs that they need, and find some way of working out what we're going to do with this awful student debt that quite a lot of people get saddled with.
Rachel?
Yeah, I do. I think it's horrendous to be a young person coming into the workplace and coming into life in the UK. It's so awful. Yes, there's...
Can we not risk talking ourselves into this sort of doom loop, which almost gives people no hope at all?
Yeah, but I'm just repeating what people that age are saying to me. Like absolute environmental catastrophe that's looming. It's like, the planet's burning and we're coming of age in this time. We've got no chance of getting home, as you say.
And that's before we've addicted them to social media, which, is bad for their mental health.
Social atomization as well. Like, people are really alienated and lonely as well, men and women. And I think it's not just about having a targeted youth program. It's about having a targeted social contract with society itself, because then helping young people will stem from that. So we are looking at massive housing programs and job creations and a Green New Deal that, Labour keeps talking about but doesn't actually put into practice, and building back up all the infrastructure that used to exist in society and has now been hollowed out thanks to so many years of austerity, amongst other things. So it's a social contract with society, right, that will produce all these benefits for young people as well.
As a result of this discussion, it's the first time I've ever been glad to be 63. But I mean, you two are sort of a younger generation.
Thanks.
I don't know what your family circumstances are, but I have to say, if I was of a generation that was thinking about having children, would I?
Well, just to say, I've got a 14-year-old, and so to not get into the doom loop, I, as a consequence of that, see a lot of younger people, spend a lot of time with younger people, and they are a great generation, and they have a lot going for them. And just because they do things slightly differently to us, like I can't believe I'm the one that's like, why are you not going to play out in the park instead of, my mum telling me get home from the park? But just because of that, it doesn't mean they aren't doing other things and they aren't, really motivated and driven in other ways. But to come back to the question, I think this is the thing that the Conservative Party over the time in government are most culpable for, and that is breaking the social contract, which Conservatives used to be so proud of, and we still would like to be, which is that if you work hard, the deal is quite simple, right? You work hard, you get on, you'll get a house, you'll get an education, you'll be able to support your family, and you'll be able to retire on a solid pension. That was the deal. And the deal is broken as soon as you hit university and you're saddled with that debt. So it needs a complete rethink. I think we can, again, have a social contract with young people. And just to say, I do think they've got a lot going for them and they're motivated for the challenges of the world ahead. But it is going to take a bit longer than the time allotted to go through how we do that
Sebastian.
Yeah, it's a tricky one electorally. I think we probably all agree that young people have a really hard time. Every generation loves to dunk on the one below them, and we've all managed to dodge that, which is really great to see. But Labour for a long time has traded on the vote of young people, whether that is young people leaving school or young people who are 34, 35, trying to buy a house and work out whether they can afford to have children. It has to deliver for them, because if it doesn't, they will go elsewhere. We've got the Greens waiting in the wings who are going to make very seductive promises, and there will be people who will roll the dice on them. And if that coalition breaks down, it's going to be very, very difficult for Labour to go ahead. So this is imperative. It cannot be slept on.
Well, if you are a young person, in fact, if you're not a young person, do phone in on Wednesday at 7. We have Zach Polanski, the leader of the Green Party, in the studio for a whole hour taking your calls. And we'll take more of your calls and questions in a moment on Cross Question. It's 8:32. Time for the news headlines with Chris Barrow.
Reform leader Nigel Farage says the abandonment of plans to delay 30 local elections is a victory for democracy. Ministers had cancelled May's votes in areas in England due to see local government reorganisation, but say they've now received new legal advice. 2 teenagers have been found guilty of killing a man they thought was a paedophile. Alexander Cashford was lured to a beach on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent last August, where he was hit with rocks and a bottle. The Oscar-winning actor Robert Duvall has died at the age of 95. He starred in the first 2 Godfather films and Apocalypse Now, amongst others. LBC weather, there's showers this evening. It's wintry in northern Scotland, fading to leave clear spells tonight and a widespread frost. Lows of -3 degrees Celsius.
This is LBC.
Octopus
Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:35 on LBC. Right, let's take some more questions to our panel. Kirsty Buchanan from The Telegraph, Sebastian Salak, a Labour local councillor, former political journalist, Emma Best, deputy leader of the Conservatives on the London Assembly, also a local councillor. Now, who's your leader on the London Assembly now? Because didn't he defect to Reform?
Sorry, what? It would be news to me. Our leader Susan Hall.
No, I did know that. But there's one, a former leader has gone to Keith Prince, hasn't he gone?
He wasn't a former leader, Keith, but I think he used to lead, funnily enough, he used to lead Redbridge Council, and I was a Conservative councillor on Redbridge Council under him as well. So.
And he's on the panel on Thursday.
Oh, well, you'll have a great conversation, I'm sure.
And Rachel Shabby is here, journalist, author and broadcaster. Right, Emmy in Camden says, do you agree that the court ruling in favour of Palestine Action is the biggest boost to our right to protest this country has seen in years? Now, three High Court judges ruled on Friday that the government's move to prescribe Palestine Action as a terror group was unlawful under the powers allowed by this country's terror legislation. But it does remain a prescribed group for now. The Home Secretary Shabama Mahmood has said she is disappointed by the ruling and that the government will appeal against it. Rachel?
I do agree. I think a lot of people watching this will be wondering why the world is so upside down in that, we have an Israeli government that's been credibly accused by various experts of committing a genocide in Gaza. We have it credibly accused of committing war crimes in Gaza. We have a warrant out for the arrest on the grounds of being war criminals for both Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. And yet, this government, which has backed Israel to the hilt and is arming and funding and providing other support to Israel, is saying that people who are protesting this genocidal war in Gaza are the ones who should be prescribed as terrorists. It's completely back to front. It's morally abhorrent that the government thought that it was okay to do this. We've seen the pictures of thousands of, pensioners, essentially, getting arrested for holding placards. I say congratulations to everybody who stood up and put their lives, essentially, put their bodies on the line and protested this and took this to court and won. Congratulations to them.
What do you say to the argument that, not all members of Palestine Action, but a group of them invaded an RAF base? They caused £30 million worth of damage to military planes. Some would say that is the act of a terror group.
Some would say that we have existing laws that will cover that. And they knew what they were doing. They knew that they were committing criminal damage and they were prepared to wear the consequences.
More than criminal damage, isn't it? When you invade a military base.
Is it though?
They also attacked a police officer with a sledgehammer. That's a little bit more than criminal damage.
But again, we have laws to cover that. That is very different from being prescribed as a terror organisation alongside the likes of Islamic State, right? It's a very different category of breaking the law, if you like. And they knew that. And by the way, this government has supported us funding and sending arms to Israel, which has been credibly accused of committing a genocide. That should be illegal. That should be stopped.
OK. Sebastian?
Let's answer the question directly. Is it the biggest boost to our right to protest in this country? Well, first of all, it's not over yet. The government is going to appeal, and so this may not be the end. I do think it should, for the reasons that you laid out. It's the military base that gets me, really. You shouldn't be able to do that and get away scot-free. But I don't think this is a drastic curtailment of anyone's right to protest, because if you really care about what's going on Palestine, and of course what's happened there has been appalling, you can go and protest, just not under the Palestine Action banner. There are other ways of expressing your views legitimately.
Do you not think it's ridiculous, though, that thousands of people have been arrested and presumably charged just for holding a placard with their name on it?
Well, it does sound silly, but the rules are the rules. They were well aware of that and they chose to transgress.
Don't complain about clogging up the courts then.
Well, there are many reasons that courts are clogged up, and we can get into that. But look, if you're going to make rules, you have to be able to stand by them, and citizens have to follow them. It's just the way a democracy works.
Emma?
Yeah, I think not get distracted by the fact that Palestine Action, or some people operating under the banner of Palestine Action, have done incredibly abhorrent thing. We mentioned the police woman getting hit with a sledgehammer in the back, fracturing her spine. There was also the van.
But didn't the people that were accused of that get off?
Well, and they're going. Some of them are coming back. They're not.
Right.
That's not quite that simple. But and they also rammed a van into a building, which could have also killed someone. So let's not detract from that. This seems a strange fight to me, because what we've essentially done by doing the terrorist categorisation, I'm not sure there was quite the evidence there. The military base, I think, if there had been a separate occasion or something else, it just wasn't quite enough evidence. I think this position was inevitable with the weight of funding that was going to come behind Palestine Action, because what you do have is the majority of people in support of Palestine Action are not in support of those actions that those people have committed. And you had people like Greta Thunberg then coming over just to hold a placard, just to get arrested. You actually gave a red rag to a bull to try and get these people the publicity they want. They wanted to get arrested, and we gave them the ammunition to go out and get arrested so they could push the cause more for Palestine Action. So it didn't achieve much, and I don't think they had the evidence to do it in the first place, whilst not taking away from the abhorrent action of some people under the banner of Palestine Action.
Did you see Greta on that protest against the Iranian government the other day?
I didn't see her latest one.
Nor did I.
Okay.
Because she wasn't there.
Oh.
Kirsty.
Well said.
But Iran's not an ally of Britain, so that makes no sense whatsoever.
It really does, but
it doesn't.
Possibly I've diverted
really
the discussion.
Doesn't.
Kirsty.
I agree that Palestine Action are not an organisation that I would want to shed any tears for. I think they're a pretty vile organisation. If you want to protest against Israel's actions, you can do that peacefully. Palestine Action, to be clear, do not do anything peacefully. That is separate to the people that want to support them and against the prescription, which I do think was a stretch, obviously. And what I don't really understand, the government had an extremism czar, John Woodcock, and he came forward with a proposal which was to sort out just this problem, that clearly Palestine Action do not meet the bar of terrorism. They meet plenty of other potential bars in terms of criminal actions, but not terrorism. They're not ISIS, they're not Hamas. That is self-evident. And he'd suggested extreme criminal protest group, which is kind of prescription light, if you like, with certain different restrictions on it. You know, you have an extremism czar. He produces a report with a set of recommendations, and it sits on a shelf. And then along comes Palestine Action. It gets prescribed, and we're now in this nonsense scenario. So to try and find a way forward on this, I can see why they're going to appeal. I think it's probably unlikely to be successful. What I would suggest the government might want to look at is some measure further down from nothing and prescription.
Rachel?
What?
Well, how do you react to that? I thought it was interesting you didn't actually intervene on Kirsty there when she was making some quite serious allegations against Palestine.
Well, I don't interrupt people when they're speaking, Iain, as you know.
Come. I think you do protest a little too much.
I think for most people watching what the government has done, that most people think that Israel has committed war crimes when polled, and support an arms embargo on Israel when polled. And so, you know, where is public sympathy on this issue? People will look at the enormous amount of money that's been spent in this incredibly authoritarian move to prescribe Palestine Action, and will think it's horrendous. Even if you don't support Palestine Action, that's fine. You don't have to support them. You do, however, need to support the democratic right to protest without being prescribed a terror group. And I think that's where, you know, a consensus of opinion is. And now we see the government say, oh, we're going to spend even more money on this, money that, of course, could be spent elsewhere.
OK. Right, let's go to a bit of an early break because I want to devote some time to the next question. It's coming up to 8:45.
This is LBC. Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Kirsty Buchanan, Sebastian Salak, Emma Best and Rachel Shabby here taking your questions. Victor in Streatham, is it the state's business whether a parent chooses to get their child injected with drugs? Now, clearly that doesn't mean like heroin or anything. Parents of children attending the schools run by the London Borough of Enfield have been warned that any pupils who are not fully vaccinated could be excluded for 3 weeks because of an outbreak of measles affecting Enfield and also neighbouring Haringey. Well, let's talk to the two local councillors on this, because, I mean, Waltham Forest, I think, is next to
we're on
Enfield,
the border.
isn't it? So if you had to make the decision on this in your borough, what would you do?
Well, that'd be more Sebastian as the administration, but certainly as in the opposition, I would support a similar move because, I mean, the state's business, it sounds very shady, doesn't it? But actually, this is really serious. And I have 3 children that go to local schools, and them contracting measles is scary. It's really scary. And Enfield is the borough, like I say, it borders us. And that's where I think 80% of the cases of this measles outbreak are. And it's literally just a mile away. So it's incredibly important to me that when I send my children to school, I know that they are as safe as I can possibly be sure they would be. And so I think that's why it's not necessarily, the state isn't mandating that you must go and get your child vaccinated, but they are saying they can't come into the school building and be in a classroom with 30 other children whilst they aren't vaccinated and whilst there's a serious case of measles, which I think that's a fair line to draw.
Do you think this is all happening because there has been a fall off in vaccinations ever since COVID?
Yeah, and before that even. So before I was on the Assembly, I used to work in children's services, and one of my jobs was actually trying to get people vaccinated. And in London, this has always been a massive issue. There's a lot of cultural kind of differences around it and trust around going to get vaccinations that causes some of the low statistics we see in London. It's also very transient, so people are renting often and they're moving on to different boroughs. They're not registered in the GP and getting those regular messages. So there's a number of reasons why in London we've got a low take up, and this happened way before the pandemic. So the pandemic
didn't help, did it?
So I was going to say the pandemic has entrenched this, but this is something that we've had long before. And I remember back in 2017, 2018, we were still having concerns about outbreaks of disease in the borough I was working, and the fact that a low amount of children were vaccinated against them.
Sebastian?
This may be a Waltham Forest first, but I agree with you on basically every count, and don't go putting that on any leaflets. But,
we're drawing it up now.
How would it help?
No, fully respect the rights of... All right, we'll get to you next. Fully respect the rights of parents to be able to send their child to school safely. I think there's an ancillary point here about misinformation and disinformation, and COVID certainly did a lot of damage in that department. And it is on governments and media owners as well to be responsible to make sure that the right information reaches people, because vaccines have always been politicised, but never so much as during the pandemic, and we really have to leave that behind.
Rachel?
Yeah, no, I also agree with both of them, and it's interesting to hear from a council perspective. I remember around the time of COVID and vaccine hesitancy, speaking with a lot of people in local councils about the difficulties with vaccine hesitancy, and one of the things that came up was, just levels of trust with, healthcare officials, or just having not negative experiences in that medical sector, and that undermining trust in some way, and how you would go about winning that trust back. And it really was just sort of street to street level. So I would imagine that something like that would be rolled out on a council to council level as well. But yeah, there's lots of reasons for the hesitancy. You're absolutely right, though, that COVID and the conspiracies that circulated and became quite entrenched around that time have made it much worse.
Kirsty?
Yeah, I mean, look, a lie travels around the world twice as fast as the truth. And I think a lot of this started with that ridiculous, I think it was in the late 90s, linking of MMR to autism. My son is autistic, and obviously this really gets my goat that people genuinely still think that this scientific study, which has been completely and utterly discredited, that's still something that I hear parents cite as being one of the reasons they don't want to get their child vaccinated, regardless of the actually very serious consequences of not getting your child vaccinated. And I completely agree. This is a public health issue. I wouldn't want my child being sent to school with children that have measles either at the moment. So I think some of the problem is that, and it's not an ancillary point to me. I think it's a very central point to me. We are in a process at the moment as a country of talking about banning social media for under 16s, and frankly, as far as I'm concerned, rightly so. That's for a multiplicity of reasons: addiction, mental health. One of them is about just the sheer amount of misinformation and disinformation. And so something like this study from 1998 probably would have died by now, but it keeps on recirculating on social media. And if we accept that social media is as damaging as it is for our children, then we need to also look at how damaging it is for ourselves and our society. And this, for me, is a classic example of that.
Now, if you're very good and answer the next question relatively briefly, we'll be able to get in another one. Grant is in Glasgow. He says councils are already backtracking on the 100% council tax raid on second homeowners, with places like Rushcliffe Borough Council in Nottinghamshire looking to scrap it less than a year after imposing it. Isn't this a clear admission that the policy was rushed, legally shaky and fundamentally punitive, and a populist cash grab which punishes hard work, aspiration and investment, all while doing nothing to fix the housing crisis? Sebastian. Many second homeowners in Waltham Forest?
Not to my knowledge. I would want to know why these councils are choosing not to impose this policy. That's the crucial question here. But the point is, it's a matter of choice. You are given the option as a council to do this. And for many councils, I'm thinking about Cornwall, I'm thinking about many other holiday destinations, really, really suffer because they are empty during the winter. There are no locals barely anymore. And the cost of housing is driving up. It's all the obvious points. And they're obvious because they're important.
Emma?
Yeah, but you can't conflate this with the short-term rental market problems, which is a separate issue because this was hitting everyone. And when you look at of course, the question's right. It was a punitive measure. It was a populist idea. It's much like talking about rent controls. All you're going to do is hamper a market which you need to be diverse. You need private landlords. You need council homes. You need people to own their own homes. You need a diverse market. It's some of the stuff they've almost tried in Spain and it doesn't work. It's this 100% council tax. It's just going to cripple the market when you need, like I say, a diverse amount of players in there, making sure that people can have homes they live in, because this cost will be passed down to those people.
Kirsty?
Yeah, the law of unintended consequences of bringing forward policy, which we've already discussed at length tonight about U-turns, that is rushed and ill thought through, and you haven't really thought about the impact on local economy.
But in areas like Cornwall, North Norfolk, where I shall disclose I had a second home which I sold last December, partly because I knew that the council were about to impose double council tax, and I thought, well, that's just one step too far. But there are some villages in Cornwall and North Norfolk that are sort of 50, 60, 70% second homeowners.
Yeah, but you've got to balance that up against what that brings in terms of local tourism and local economy. And those don't sit there, not all of those sit there empty while someone swans down once in a while from London to get their boogie board out. You know, quite a lot of these are Airbnb'd, and that brings, local... well, maybe that's because you can afford it, Ian. Not everyone that's got a second home can afford to leave it empty, except for 2 weekends of the year,
It's rather more than that. But.
And so a lot of these are Airbnb'd out, right, which brings local people, brings money into the economy too. So I'm not saying that it's not balanced, but, I think 100% is punitive.
Rachel?
Look, I don't know enough about this story, so I'm not going to just, mouth off about it. But, I do think that there are not enough controls. Renters need much more protections and controls. Renters are having a horrendous time in the market. Landlords that abuse and increase rent beyond a certain amount should absolutely be capped and penalised for it. And we need a massive social housing building project in this country.
I want to come back to you on that, but I want to get another question, so I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Vaz is in Warwick, who says, as the Labour Party keeps picking fights with the media, investigations into journalists, appointing Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the US, are we at risk of the media acting as a sort of official opposition? Well, that has been an accusation against the media in the past. I think when the Conservatives, shall we say, weren't the best of oppositions under William Hague, the media was accused of that, trying to provide an opposition to Tony Blair. I don't think it did a very good job. Rachel, let's come to you first on that, as the, I think, only media person here.
Yeah, I do think a lot of people have been talking about...
sorry.
Hang on a minute.
Sorry.
What am I
take that back. I take that back. I apologise. It's been a hard day.
There's been a lot of the great noticing. Look, Labour they were playing politics on easy in the run-up to the election. They weren't scrutinised anywhere near enough. Starmer wasn't scrutinised anywhere near enough because people basically just wanted to get rid of the failing Tories, and actually people were quite pleased with Starmer essentially purging the left of the party. And there seems to be this great noticing of all the nefarious things that the Labour Party has been up to, including with Labour Together.
That really, Sebastian, let's come to you on this. That really, I was genuinely shocked when I saw that on the front of the Sunday Times yesterday, where Labour Together, a sort of pressure group within the Labour Party, friendly to Keir Starmer, has been investigating the private lives of Sunday Times journalist Gabriel Pogren, who I don't know particularly well, but he comes on the programme occasionally. It's outrageous, isn't it?
This is a really, really strange one. And look, I'm a journalist by trade as well, I'm sorry to admit. And so I come to this as a journalist. You want to be able to prioritise journalists acting freely, doing their job, uncovering the truth. That is crucial to our democracy. What I was curious about was the conversation between Josh Simons, who was the director of Labour Together, now Cabinet Office Minister, and Kevin Maguire at the Mirror. Kevin Maguire had previously said he shouldn't be a minister. They spoke on the phone. He then retracted that. Now, I don't know what happened in that conversation, but I wish I did, because it sounds like there was more crucial information. So I'm very, very careful to criticise anybody here, because I don't think we have all the facts yet.
And this is Josh Simons, a regular on this programme, who is a Cabinet Office minister in the Cabinet Office, which is investigating this whole scenario. You couldn't make it up.
Yeah, you would hope that he would recuse himself and have no part in it.
Emma.
Just to go, obviously, no, Kemi is the official opposition. And to go back and to nicely dovetail the beginning of the show, the reason why there's been so many U-turns is the pressure that Kemi and the Conservatives have put on this government. So, yes, I think we always want the media...
I think you'll find on this latest U-turn it was reform
I wouldn't give the Lib Dems much credit for this one, but I will give Reform their dues on this one. They did do well, but at the moment they do have the donors and the backing to get that legal challenge out there and fund that. But overall,
I do know Gabriel Pogren very well. He's an exceptional journalist. I think what has happened is absolutely scandalous to investigate in the first place journalists, their background, their heritage, their personal lives. But what is even more serious about this is that having had that information, they have then used it to effectively run a smear campaign against these journalists and make all sorts of unfounded accusations about the sources of their stories that they simply cannot substantiate. And back to the point about Kevin Maguire, he did talk to Josh Simons. He did say, well, I've actually changed my mind. And then subsequent to that, because Josh Simons' story seems to be shifting quite a lot, and as more details have come out, as we go back to U-turns again, Kevin Maguire's done a U-turn now, and now he says, no, actually, I think what has happened here is an absolute scandal. No journalist should be facing this level of investigation and smear for doing their job.
Labour Together's Chief Executive Alison Phillips, former editor of the Daily Mirror, has told LBC that she is committed to ensuring Labour Together aspires to the highest standards of probity at all times. To be fair, she wasn't in charge at this point, and that her organisation stands ready to support the Public Relations and Communications Association and other relevant governance bodies with its review of this issue. Should be lucky if they don't have to answer to the courts, I would suggest here. Now, the fun question, Matt in High Wycombe. Barack Obama has said that no evidence was presented to him that extraterrestrial life exists. Do you think it does? And if so, what form does it take? Kirsty.
Oh, me? Oh, no, I'm going to be really boring and say that, if there was extraterrestrial life, and it came here, it probably would take one look and get back in its spaceship and hive off again. The thing that I did find really disappointing about the Obama thing is he said he knows for a fact that there's no such thing as Area 51, which is this secret base. That I found really disappointing. I always kind of fancied there was
the truth is out there, Kirsty.
He said there was nothing in it.
What an empty base with a load of conspiracy theories.
They would say that.
There's no aliens in it.
Rachel?
Apparently, 88% of people who are experts in extraterrestrial and planetary whatever, I don't know what the term is,
malarkey,
say it's likely that an alien species exists. It's likely. It's plausible considering the amount of space. However, I agree that if there are, they're probably massively superior in intelligence. Probably do know how to get in touch with us, but have looked at us and gone, nope, no, thank you. Give that one a miss.
Yeah, 100% aliens exist, and wouldn't it be boring to think they don't? And I think you're right. They're probably much more advanced than us. They've probably got the massive brains and the big green heads, and they sit there watching us like reality TV, laughing at us.
See, I think it's the opposite. I think they exist, but I think they're a petri dish on Ganymede or something. They're tiny, we can't see them, they can't do anything. And it's just as well because we've got enough to be worried about on this planet.
I suspect they do exist and that they are lizards and that David Icke. Before I go on with that sentence,
Iain,
I'm not going to because I don't want to be in a court case. Thank you all very much indeed for taking part in the programme today. Now, on tomorrow's panel, we have Reform UK's local government chief and former Tory MP and council leader Ben Bradley, the columnist and author Yasmin Alibaya-Brown, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Gillian Keegan, plus the Lib Dem frontbencher Luke Taylor. Now, after the news, we're going to come back to the issue which the panel discussed about 10 minutes ago, the measles outbreak in North London. At least 34 children have been diagnosed with the disease, which is highly contagious and dangerous for people who aren't fully vaccinated. And that's prompted Enfield Council to write to parents whose kids attend the school it runs to warn that those children who are not fully vaccinated could be excluded from school for 3 weeks for their own protection. Vaccine hesitancy has got worse since the COVID pandemic. So what should be done about this to help keep these children safe? Do councils and health authorities need to intervene more to effectively force parents to get their kids jabbed? 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, elections across 30 councils will go ahead this May after the government U-turned over a plan to postpone them. Local Government Secretary Steve Reed says the decision was taken following recent legal advice after a challenge by Reform UK. The government has agreed to pay the party's court costs, which is understood that it could run to 6 figures. The party's leader Nigel Farage claims it's a victory for democracy.
In some cases, this would have been the second year in a row that people who are paying their council tax would have been denied the chance to vote. So that's why we took them to the High Court. We were due there this Thursday. They've caved, they've collapsed. It's a victory for reform.
2 teenagers have been found guilty of the manslaughter of a man they thought was a paedophile in Kent. The 16-year-old girl and 15-year-old boy killed 49-year-old Alexander Cashford on the Isle of Sheppey last August. The court heard how he gave the girl his number and then was lured to the beach. Detective Chief Inspector Neil Kimber is from Kent Police.
Clearly there may be some moral stance on that, but what he'd actually done is nothing wrong. He was made aware that the female defendant in this case was 16. She was actually 16 in this case. So in terms of the eyes of the law, he hadn't done anything wrong.
Sir Keir Starmer has pledged to act in months, not years, to protect young people from addictive social media platforms. Ministers have proposed new restrictions for children. There'll also be a consultation on a potential social media ban. Lisa Knaven's son Isaac died at age 13. She believes he'd taken part in an online craze, and she welcomed today's announcement.
There is a lot of work still to be done, and we don't want it just to be lip service from the government. We all need to pull together. We all do have a duty of care, and those platforms are needing to be held accountable.
The Oscar-winning actor Robert Duvall has died at the age of 95. He was best known for his roles in Apocalypse Now and The Godfather. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 24 points at 10,473. The pound buys $1.36 and €1.15. LBC weather: showers this evening are fading to leave clear spells tonight. There's also widespread frost, a warning of snow in northern Scotland and ice for many northern and eastern parts. Lows of -3 degrees Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Chris Barrow.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
9:06 on LBC. Welcome to the programme if you've just joined us. I feel it's a bit like Groundhog Day, but going back about 5 years with this next subject, because if you remember during COVID, we would have long, sometimes painful discussions about vaccines there were all sorts of conspiracy theories about what these vaccines would do to you if you took them, whether they should be made mandatory. And I don't look back on that time with any great affection at all, because it pitted people against each other in a fairly vicious way. And I don't mind admitting I was somebody, in fact, I was regularly called a vaccine fascist, because I could not understand anybody who would not want to have the vaccine. And I think I've been proved right on that, because they were effective. And all of these scare stories that existed about what they would do to you, well, of course they affected some people in an adverse manner. All vaccines do. That kind of goes with the territory. And I understand why people were a little bit sceptical, because they were developed very, very quickly. But the measles vaccine has been around now for decades. And unfortunately, one of the consequences of the vaccine hesitancy, shall we call it, that occurred during the COVID period, is that many parents are now somewhat sceptical about whether their children should have any form of vaccination at all, despite the, I was going to say overwhelming evidence, but I think that underestimates it. I think despite the absolute certain evidence that these vaccines are safe for virtually everybody. So we come to the story today, which is provoking our discussion this hour. Parents in North London are being told that their children could be excluded from school if they're not fully vaccinated against measles amid an outbreak of the highly contagious disease. Now, when I was a child at primary school, measles was a big thing in the country, and I think the measles vaccine had only just been developed. And I can't honestly put my hand on my heart and say that I had measles, but I think I did. And for some people, measles, it can be the most debilitating of diseases. It can affect the brain in the long term. It can lead to death in some circumstances. So why on earth people wouldn't want to have their children vaccinated against it, I don't know. Now, unvaccinated pupils identified as close contacts of people with measles could be excluded from schools in Enfield for 21 days in accordance with national guidelines, Enfield councillors said in a letter to all parents in the borough, which went out about 2 weeks ago. Now, at least 34 children have contracted measles in Enfield so far this year. A local health chief has told the BBC, "We are worried because actually this is a significantly increased number than what we're used to. Asking unvaccinated close contacts of measles cases to stay off school is fairly standard practice when there are local outbreaks." A local GP surgery said infections have been confirmed in at least 7 schools in Enfield and neighbouring Haringey. The number of cases seen in the area is not out of the ordinary for such outbreaks, which have been occurring reasonably frequently since late 2023. I have to say, I thought measles had been eradicated from this country a few years ago. Maybe someone can ring in and tell me if that's right, but that's certainly in my head that was the case. So there are various questions that arise from this. If you live in Enfield and Haringey and you've got children at school, I'd love to hear from you to get your reaction to this news. And do you support the schools who want to exclude pupils who have not been vaccinated against measles? 0345 6060 973. And what can be done about the rising levels of vaccine hesitancy? Do councils and health authorities need to intervene more to effectively force parents to get their kids jabbed? Now, that's where I would draw a line. I do not believe in making this sort of thing mandatory, because I think parenting is a very difficult thing. And we often criticise parents for sort of some of the, what I would call the more, or failing to do the more basic aspects of parenting, teaching a child, basically potty training a child, teaching a child how to brush its teeth. We're sort of abdicating those responsibilities to schools now, which I think is an outrage. But I do think parents should have a role in making these decisions, but they've got to do it on the basis of scientific knowledge, surely, rather than reading some conspiracy theory on some website on the internet which has no basis in science. 0345 6060 973. Let's talk to Professor Adam Finn, who is Professor of Paediatrics at the University of Bristol, who's a former member of the UK's Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation and now sits on one of its subcommittees. Adam, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Was I right in saying that measles had been eradicated in this country? And if that was the case, how come it's come back?
Hi, nice to hear you. And yes, we talked with LBC quite a bit during the pandemic, so it was interesting to remember that. So in answer to your question, yes, we had been allocated eradication status, or elimination status is actually the correct word, by WHO, but recently have lost that status because we're seeing transmission of the virus again significantly in this country, including in the outbreak in Enfield that you've just been talking about. So yes, unfortunately, we've gone backwards. We'd got to a point where the odd case was being introduced and there were very small outbreaks, but now it's got much worse and we're managing to maintain the circulation of the virus within the country because there are too many children who've not been vaccinated.
Well, we'll come on to that in a second, but what's the situation in France, Holland, Germany, Spain?
I'm afraid to say that this is not a unique problem to the United Kingdom. We've been seeing outbreaks in different parts of both Western and Eastern Europe for a number of years now, so that the trend, which in the early part of the second decade of the century was towards elimination of measles in this continent, as had been achieved at that time in the Americas. We're now seeing more and more measles in different parts of the continent. So yes, it's happening everywhere.
Well, let's look at the falling rates of vaccination. I mean, I'm assuming it's across the board, not just in the MMR jab, but and the increased rate of vaccine hesitancy, presumably, is a follow-on from COVID.
I think that's part of it, although the coverage rates for all the vaccines for children had been going down very slowly but progressively for a number of years before the COVID pandemic. So it's not just a COVID effect. The COVID pandemic may have accelerated things, unfortunately, but that's not the whole story. There are basically two different points of view as to why this is the case. One is that there's misinformation rife and people are believing it. The other is that the long period of austerity that we enjoyed during the second decade of the century resulted in significantly reduced capacity within the health service to chase up those people who need a bit of chasing up and to get this done. And so I don't think either of those theories are mutually exclusive. It's probably a bit of both.
How do you get it?
Measles is extraordinarily easily contracted. The last case that I saw was a little child who'd been admitted to our hospital for some routine surgery. And because it was slightly quicker to get through from the car park into the ward through the emergency department rather than through the front door of the hospital, the parents brought the child through the emergency department where, unbeknownst to them, another child was sitting waiting to be seen who was incubating measles. That was enough. They literally walked past this other child. 10 days later, their child got measles. It's that easy.
So effectively, a child... Do you remember those... Was it... there was some sort of breakfast cereal there was an advert for where they always had this sort of... image all around them for like 5 feet, looking as if they were not vibrating, but sort of had this aura about them. So that's, in a sense, what you've got to imagine that a child has. Sort of you walk within however much distance of a child and you can easily get it, I suppose.
Yes, in other words, you breathe in the air that they've just breathed out. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah. You breathe in the air that they just breathed out. They can be a couple of meters away, no contact, no touch. You've got it. It's very, very easy to get measles if you've not been immunised or not had measles before.
And presumably records are kept of which children have had the immunisation.
Oh yes, we have very good records in this country of who's had vaccines, and that's really important actually, because in order to work out how well vaccines work, we do need to know whether or not children who get sick have had the vaccines or not. But the case in the case of the MMRV vaccine, which we're now using, which contains the measles vaccine, it's really very, very effective vaccine. So that the 2-dose course is almost approaching 100% effective. It's preventing you getting measles. It's a very good vaccine indeed.
And is this just for children? I mean, if you're an adult and you know that you haven't been immunised against measles, A, is that possible to do? And B, how many adults can get measles compared to children?
Actually, these days, measles in adults is something that is seen not infrequently because we have had a vaccine program, and so measles has not been around. So people who didn't get vaccinated have got through without getting measles. When I was a child, everyone got measles. I got measles. I was born in the late 50s, and measles was prevalent. By the time you were 3, you'd had measles. But nowadays, you can be an adult and not have had measles, and you can be immunized perfectly safely and effectively with the MMR or the MMRV vaccine. So that's not a problem. It just relies on you being aware that you've not been vaccinated. And if you had measles, you'll know that you've had it. It's not an illness that goes unnoticed.
So if I have some young parents in Enfield and Haringey listening to this programme right now, and they're thinking, we haven't had our children immunised, what's your advice to them?
Oh, please do go and get the vaccine done. I mean, you mentioned in your introduction this issue of whether or not people should be compelled to have their children immunised. There's absolutely no need to compel anyone to have their children immunised, because if they're given the right information, it's a no-brainer. It's an obviously sensible decision to make. The vaccine's available on the NHS at your local surgery. You'll be given it immediately if you show up with a child that needs it. It's the easiest thing in the world to do, and certainly in the current circumstances in Enfield, it would be mad not to.
Adam, thank you very much indeed. That's Professor Adam Finn there, Professor of Paediatrics at the University of Bristol. Right, we're going to come to your calls now. I'm going to say one thing. I'd really like to hear from parents who maybe have decided not to have their children immunised. The one thing I will say is, I'm not going to have a go at you. I'm not going to shout at you. I will possibly disagree with you, but I want to try and understand the thought process that leads you to think that you know better than the medics here. But also, if you are in Enfield and Haringey and you think that this is outrageous that the schools are going to exclude children who haven't been immunised, I'd like to hear from you too. And if you've had measles, as I say, I think I had it as a child. I'm going to text my sister in the break and I'll ask her if she can remember. And how did it affect you? What are the effects of measles? Because they can be pretty awful and also, I believe, pretty long-term as well, potentially, not in all cases, but some. 0345 6060 973. It's 19 minutes past 9.
This is LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
21 minutes past 9 on LBC. Let's go straight to your calls on measles and also the wider subject of vaccine hesitancy. Why are you hesitant to get your child vaccinated or even yourself vaccinated? 0345 6060 973. Grace is in Ealing. Hi, Grace.
Hi. I think we're really, really privileged to have the access to vaccinations and healthcare more broadly that we do, and we can forget that there are people in our world who don't. Our government's just cut aid to Gavi, which provides vaccinations for people in some of the poorest parts of the world, which is absurd and very silly by our government. So I think we're really, really fortunate. But I also understand that some people feel generally anxious for a number of reasons. I think the world is such a confusing and complicated place, all the more so where we've got media, I'm not criticising media, but where we're hearing scary stories more often. People are feeling that there might be some deep conspiracy going on and seeing things that lead them to feel that way. So obviously people are more anxious than they might have been maybe in previous decades when they didn't have so much coming at them that led them to feel afraid. During the COVID pandemic, there was obviously a lot of discussion then about COVID vaccines supposedly being dangerous or nefarious. I didn't really feel particularly that I needed the COVID vaccination because I have a weird habit of not getting ill when the rest of my household does, including when COVID hit our household. I just don't seem to get these things. But I thought to myself, firstly, I'm not worrying about any kind of conspiracy. Jesus tells us not to be afraid, so I'm not afraid. And also, he tells us to care about our neighbours, and I really did not want to get COVID and pass it on to anyone who had a weaker immune system than myself. And obviously, the worry with kids not getting their vaccinations is that they can pass things on to kids who might be unable to get vaccinations because of particular health conditions. Some people can't get vaccinations because of particular immune situations that mean that it's dangerous for them to have their vaccination. So it's really important that all the kids who are able to get it do get it. But there's going to need to be serious behavioural analysis to understand all of the motivations for parents who are avoiding vaccinations, so that it's not just the case they're feeling even more suspicious of authority if they're kind of pressured, because I think that that's a worry as well. And I worry more broadly about how we're seeing a rising tide of opposition to science, because it's not only that there's more people who are anti-vax, there are also more people who are opposing climate science and other things, and I think that is a dangerous pattern that we're seeing in society more broadly.
I think part of the issue also is that people are very risk averse in today's society. And of course, if you are worried that your child could get damaged either physically or mentally through having any kind of vaccination, whether it's for measles, MMR, whatever, you are naturally going to worry. But if you take that to its logical extent, you would never set foot outside your house. You would never drive in a car with your child. You would never take your child on an aeroplane, would you?
Yeah, and I think people are unaware of the risk that these illnesses themselves pose because we've been relatively free of them for a fair bit in our country, and maybe people who are having kids now are of an age whereby they didn't see these things growing up in the way that you might have done. So they're not really thinking about the danger of the illness, and instead they're more emotionally reactive to things they're seeing from maybe some friends online who are suggesting that there are dark forces in our pharmaceutical industry, which, I mean, there are dark forces everywhere. There are selfish people everywhere. But people feel very suspicious. And that's increasingly something that we're seeing, more and more people feeling suggested to conspiracy theories. It also should probably be mentioned that there are some people from minority communities who are suspicious because of things that have happened in parts of the global south in the past where people of colour were not treated with respect by the medical industry. And so I think some people from minority communities have suspicion for those reasons, but there really needs to be kind of behavioural analysis to fully understand people's reasoning, so that people can be nudged in a direction that's most helpful for their children and for society more broadly.
Thank you very much, Grace. Very good call as ever. Let's go to Rebecca in Glasgow. Rebecca, good evening. What would you like to say?
Hi. When I was 5, I had a very, very serious case of measles. My mum had our GP out at 2 o'clock in the morning. A fever was raging. I had spots inside my body, under my eyelids, in my ears, in my nostrils, in my mouth, in my lady bits. I was literally just red. You couldn't see where one spot started and the other spot ended. I was very, very ill with it, and I never, ever recovered. I was always fatigued. I was always in pain, and I didn't get fully diagnosed until my 30s with ME. I burned out, and for the last 8 years, I'm now 51, for the last 8 years I have been predominantly bedbound. I am wiped out after getting up and going to the bathroom, and that's as much as I can manage some days. And my mother she lived with the torment and the guilt of me getting measles that seriously, and that was back in 1979. And I had an inoculation, but obviously my body, it didn't work with my body. My son was born in 2003, and I agonised over the MMR because it was at that time when there was all the kerfuffle over the MMR. And I remembered what I went through, and I remembered, the warnings about deafness, brain damage, and I thought, who am I to be cavalier with my son's health? And I got him that injection. Now, he had an egg intolerance at the time, and when he got the MMR, we had to wait 4 hours at the GP surgery in case there was a reaction to it. And it was the hardest 4 hours, because try keeping a tot from boredom for 4 hours in a doctor's surgery. It was quite hard, but he was well on it. He's had every inoculation he was supposed to have, and he has not had any adverse effects. But I am now 51. Most days I am lucky if I can go to the bathroom upright. Some days I crawl to the bathroom. Most days I cannot go downstairs. I'm feeling breathless now just speaking to you. And this is me for the rest of my life.
And that's all because you had measles as a child?
I had measles. And I have a neuroimmune disease now. And there is damage to my cells. I cannot store energy. It's just completely taken over my body. My body is wrecked, and I'm now existing, not living. And I honestly believe that what the lady that spoke before said is right. We have had a couple of generations of children who grew up not seeing the impacts of illnesses, and they're not understanding the real impact of it. But we also have a community now where 1 in 2 people are going to get cancer. And when they're getting chemotherapy, my mum was on chemotherapy for 3 years, their immune systems are non-existent. And all it takes is for them to pop to a shop one day and pass some child that's harbouring this or brewing this disease, and it can cause untold problems for these people too. So we really do have to think about everybody when we're thinking about inoculations. And honestly, my son is 22, extremely healthy. He's had every inoculation that he was supposed to have. And I do believe that if we're going to put our children into school, they must have the inoculations that they're supposed to have, unless there is a very good reason for them not to, a medical reason for them not to have it. Because we owe each other the safety, the knowledge that we are putting our children into school in good faith, that they're going to be safe, they're going to be well, and that we're preventing our children from becoming ill and preventing somebody else's family member from becoming ill. We would never go on holiday to a far-flung country without having the inoculations we need for that. We would never do that. So why not think about the illnesses that we can prevent on our own doorstep? Because I'm not living anymore. I'm in constant pain, constant fatigue, and it's not a life. And this can happen to anybody who catches a virus. So why make it easier on an illness to spread, and much harder on the medical world, who has no cure for what I have, who can't make life easier for me since I've been in, I'm in the kind of moderate to severe category. And people will end up like me. We got COVID, people have long COVID, and their lives have never been the same since. Just everybody, please, just think about your children's future, because this is no way to live.
I hope that anyone who works in a doctor's surgery in Enfield and Haringey can somehow record the conversation that we've just had, Rebecca, because I think you've performed an extremely important social service by making this call, because you have spelled out in very simple language exactly what the long-term consequences of measles can be. And if I was a young mother or young father listening to what you've just said, I'd be down that doctor's surgery at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning saying, can I get this vaccine for my child, please? So I imagine it's been a difficult call to make. You've said that it tires you out.
I'm waiting to.
Even have. Well, I and all my listeners, Rebecca, are very, very grateful to you for making this phone call.
Oh, thank you. I just hope everybody does.
Yeah.
Just take an extra minute to think. Just an extra minute.
And I'm sending you a virtual hug over the airwaves.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I'm not sure that'll make you feel better, but there we are. Rebecca, great call. Thank you very much. You see, that is the consequence of not believing the science, isn't it? 0345 6060 973. It's 9:33 on LBC. Let's get the news headlines with Chris Barrow.
Reform leader Nigel Farage says the abandonment of plans to delay 30 local elections is a victory for democracy. Ministers had cancelled May's votes in areas in England due to see local government reorganisation, but say they've now received new legal advice. 2 teenagers have been found guilty of killing a man they thought was a paedophile. Alexander Cashford was lured to a beach on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent last August, where he was hit with rocks and a bottle. The Oscar-winning actor Robert Duvall has died at the age of 95. He starred in the first 2 Godfather films and Apocalypse Now, amongst others. LBC weather, there's showers this evening. It's wintry in northern Scotland, fading to leave clear spells tonight and a widespread frost. Lows of -3 degrees Celsius.
This is LBC. Sunlight Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
9:36. There are some times when you take a call from a listener doing this job and you think, I will remember that call in several years' time. It's difficult to know what to say to somebody who is effectively being laid low for the rest of their life by a disease that was so easily avoidable. And your heart goes out to people in that position, doesn't it? Anne says, measles is an airborne disease. Where are the airborne mitigations? How can we have learnt precisely nothing about how to contain infectious diseases from COVID? The infection prevention and control guidelines state that schools and nurseries are supposed to implement clean air measures. They do not. The government turns a blind eye. Why is this acceptable? If they stop cleaning the surfaces in schools, then parents would be up in arms. But ignoring airborne disease transmission is ignored. We choose to do nothing. It baffles me. I don't really agree with that, but it's not choosing to do nothing. We have a inoculation, a vaccine that prevents people from getting measles. So yes, it is an airborne. It is transmitted through the air, but if you have the vaccination, you don't get it, and it's provided free of charge on the NHS. So I'm not quite sure sort of that you're right there, if I'm honest, Anne. Let's go to John, who's in Greenwich. Hello, John. John, are you there? No. Mohammed is in Watford. Hello, Mohammed.
Hi there. Good evening. I had my son at the age of 22, and I didn't give him the MMR vaccine because, like many people, I was worried about the link with autism. Now, fast forward about 13 years later, last summer, the measles ran through my family. All four of my children caught measles quite badly. And my eldest, who's 13 at the time, caught measles and then turned into pneumonia and got admitted to intensive care. So his life was really on the line. All based on a decision that I made when I was much younger, with a lot of things on the online, worried about him catching, getting autism and misinformation, led to the decision of him being in intensive care. Now, luckily, he made it through, but he has lifelong consequences where his lungs are working at 65%. And I just want parents to really know that decisions that you make for your children is the difference between life and death. And not only but that, it's decisions that you make can really impact on how they are like. So now I have to live with that my son's lungs are never going to be fully working based on what I done. And it is hard to live with, but I just want parents to know that whatever you do for your children, please make it based on that you're fully informed.
Why do you think, looking back, why do you think you were convinced by those arguments?
Because you have a lot of people within the community telling you, autism's on the rise. If you get an MMR vaccine, Tony Blair didn't give it to his child, and he was the prime minister. So why would you give it to your child? And that weighs really heavy.
Mm.
And you've got the whole world on your shoulders at such a young age, and you've got to make a decision for your child. And unfortunately, it was the wrong one. And I can admit it.
Yeah, and good on you for phoning in to do just that, because there aren't many people who would do that, I don't think. So I admire you for doing that. But it's a bit like the last caller. You've seen the consequences of not having this vaccination, haven't you?
Not only I have seen it, my son talks about it. And my son, when he was in hospital and he got out of his intensive care, he said, "Dad, if you would have gave me the MMR, I wouldn't be here today." And that just was really heavy.
Well, it's a dagger to your heart, isn't it?
Yeah. And what can I say? Yes, I'm sorry, but I wish I could change back time, but I can't. And I just want all the parents to know. And that's one thing I've been doing since then, trying to educate as many parents. I run quite a few nurseries around London, and I've been telling all the parents at my nurseries, please vaccinate your children. Please take advice from your health professional, from your doctor. Don't take advice from Google.
You said you run nurseries throughout London. Would you consider having a vaccinated child only policy in your nurseries?
It's hard because also where the law doesn't allow us to discriminate, now that comes under the ban of we can't actively discriminate children or parents based on their decisions. We don't have that on our side. So if that's the rule that the DfE made or Ofsted made, that's a different story. But we can't actively impose that rules ourselves.
Even though the schools in Enfield apparently can.
I don't know how they can do that, because I know other nurseries that have tried to do that Ofsted have clearly told them that is discrimination. Parents have a choice. And vaccination is you don't have to vaccinate a child by law. So you're effectively excluding a child.
Well, you are excluding a child, but for the safety of all the others. I would have thought the first priority of anybody owning a nursery ought to be the safety of the children. And if the children are kept safe by not admitting people, even if it's kids, even if it's only for a short amount of weeks, I would have thought that was a decision that they should be allowed to make.
I agree, but we can't make that decision, and that is something that is with the DfE and Ofsted, and that is something that they should look at.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Mohammed, well done for picking up the phone tonight. Really appreciate it. Jane says, I'm in tears listening to Rebecca talking about her long-term suffering due to her lifelong illness. I live in Enfield myself. I wholeheartedly agree that we all need to take her heartfelt advice to have your child vaccinated, as I did with my 4 children in the 80s and 90s. It is the right thing to exclude any child that has not had the vaccination from school. My sister has just replied to my WhatsApp message, and she says that all 3 of us were vaccinated with the MMR jab in the 1960s. I think it was actually invented in 1963, so we would have been among the first to actually have it. So my memory of having measles is obviously playing tricks on me. Not for the first time, it has to be said. John's in Greenwich. Hi, John.
Yeah, hi, Ben. Ben, I just...
No, Ben's at 10.
Oh, sorry.
You're getting ahead of yourself, John.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got a few questions to ask you. Was it the thalidomide injection that whatever they gave to children in the 60s, 70s that caused deformities?
Yes.
Right. So therefore, right, I'm just on the fence, but. Hang
on a second. Let me try and get you off that fence, because you're absolutely right. I mean, thalidomide, when it was first introduced, was obviously passed by all the regulatory authorities, but it became clear very quickly that, I think it was relatively quickly, that it was something that caused lifelong deformities. But you can't just use one example to say, well, because of that, therefore, I wouldn't advise parents to have their children vaccinated for other things, because the MMR jab has been available, as I said, well, that one since 1971, the measles one since 1963, and it is proven beyond any doubt whatsoever that for the overwhelming majority of children, i.e. sort of 99.9%, it is effective and it works, and it does not have consequences in the way, obviously, that the thalidomide one did. So, I mean, I think we've got the evidence that we need here. And I do understand why people were sceptical about the COVID vaccine, because that had only just been developed. But luckily, we haven't seen sort of massive side effects from that ever since that was introduced. So I don't think you can use thalidomide as, if that didn't work, I'm not going to have my children vaccinated with anything.
Hold on. What, right? Now you're talking about COVID. So I never had any COVID jabs, and my brother got a heart condition from the Pfizer jab. And let me tell you something. We're identical twins. Okay, identical twins, right? We're called mirror image twins, right? And he had the COVID jab, and he got a heart condition now that he's having to live with. Yeah. So please don't say to me, right? And also parents. The parents have the children, and the mums give birth to their children, right? It's for them to decide and have the power to make that decision. Do you think any parent who's a responsible parent, right, would do something to harm their children or not do something for their children's welfare?
I agree with you that it is the parent's decision, but I disagree with you when you say that last bit, because I think parents have a responsibility to inform themselves as to what the track record of the different vaccinations are. Mohammed was very honest when he just rang in, and he said he believed what he read about the Andrew Wakefield scenario, about his conspiracy theories about it causing autism. Well, he shouldn't have done that. He knows he shouldn't have done that. And if he had informed himself better, he would have made a different decision. So all parents, the evidence is out there. You should not believe sort of conspiracy websites.
I'm not saying about conspiracy. What I'm saying is that years ago, when I was younger, the GP used to come round your house and they had a relationship with you, a trust relationship.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that trust has broken down.
Oh, I agree with you there.
Don't have time.
Yep.
Don't have time for parents or their children. Oh, take your child home. He's got a cold. The next thing, the child's rushed to hospital, dies because they've got a clot on the brain or something wrong with them. They misdiagnose so many young children. So the trust with the GPs and the trust with people that are supposed to look after your children is has, in my opinion, deteriorated to such an extent that people are I just think parents have the power, and it's for them to decide whether they want to inject their children. And as the COVID jab, coming back to the COVID jab, do you know how many COVID jabs people have had to have, for COVID, and then repeat jabs and repeat this and repeat that?
I've had them.
Chemicals.
I've had them all.
Right, well, good for you. Lucky you never had a reaction to it. But I think,
and nor have most people.
Well, my twin brother, like I told you, identical twin, has got a heart condition from Pfizer. So,
well, you say it's from Pfizer. You don't know that for a fact. You are assuming that is the case, but you don't know that. John, thank you. Catherine says, hi, Iain. Thalidomide was a medication given to pregnant women to prevent morning sickness. It was not a childhood vaccination. Well, if I infer that it was, apologies for that. I don't think I did, but let's just clear that up. Thank you very much indeed. It's 9:47.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
Britain's youth unemployment rate is higher than the rest of Europe for the first time. So what are we getting so wrong? Plus, is it fair to ban unvaccinated children from school?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
You know that feeling
Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
10 to 10 on LBC. Let's go to Anne in Penrith. Anne, very good evening.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. What would you like to say?
I'm Anne that sent the WhatsApp message that you read out, and you said you didn't actually agree with me. So I wanted to just expand on what I said, if I may, just to, because you mentioned that you thought, because I was saying about it being an airborne disease and that there's things that we could and should be doing. And you were saying that obviously vaccination is something that we're doing. So you're right in the sense that we're not doing nothing. But I think part of the reason that we are in such a mess with public health is simply due to that over-reliance on vaccination. I'm not saying vaccination is not important. I'm very pro-vaccination, and I think everybody should have them to avoid situations like this. But public health is not just about vaccination, and we have moved so far towards relying completely on the medical interventions to prevent disease, and I think that's a real problem.
So what would you like to see happen? Because I think a lot of people are still doing things that they used to do in COVID. I think a lot of people are still washing their hands more often than they probably ever did before, because they have an understanding that is an easy way to pass on germs by not washing your hands.
Yeah, I mean, that is washing your hands is not going to stop you from breathing in airborne viral particles. And I think this is where the disconnect is. And I think that's where public health is just really letting us all down, because important information about how diseases transmit is not being given to the public. And so people are washing their hands. But what's that doing? I mean, measles remains airborne. So if you've got a child in a classroom who's got measles, then those viral particles are going to be floating in the air for hours. And you can clean surfaces and wear plastic gloves and do all of those things. But the reality is that infection control guidelines say that there should be people should be monitoring and improving the indoor air quality, and it's simply not happening. And it states that there should be regular opening of windows, monitoring of carbon dioxide, and the use of air filters. And where are they? Now, I'm not saying that's the answer to this outbreak of measles, but I'm saying that is part of what we ought to be doing. It's in the infection control guidelines, and I just don't understand why it's not happening. Like COVID should have been the point at which everybody said, okay, there's a real blind spot here in public health. We are now at the mercy of this. We need to be making sure that we're cleaning the air to remove this virus and protect people. But it didn't happen. And we're still no further on in the way that we're doing. And we have really gone backwards, because I mean, if you go back to Florence Nightingale, she wrote a book and she said the first rule of nursing is to keep the air within as pure as the air without. So we used to know about the importance of non-pharmaceutical interventions in public health, and it was public health. That's what everybody did when there were measles outbreaks and when there was the Spanish flu. Schools went outside, there were outdoor nurseries, and it reduced transmission of disease before we had vaccinations. And we've kind of thrown all of that information out of the window and are now completely reliant on vaccination. I just don't understand why we're in that position when we could be getting air filters. All of those schools in Enfield, they should have air filters in them right now to prevent the transmission of measles if they're having an outbreak. And that should be in all schools, in all classrooms and all nurseries as standard. Because we clean the water, but we don't do anything about the children breathing in dirty air.
All right, Anne, thank you very much. Let's move on to Thomas in Acton. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to make 2 quick points. I was saying to your producer. Number one, a lot of people associate the risk with MMR because it's a combined vaccine. Yeah. Well, there is available, if you want, single vaccines. You can have them singly done. Now, I don't know if you can have it done in this country, and if you do, it's probably not on an NHS, unlike the MMR, which is free. But it is available as an option. Definitely, it's available as an option abroad. That was my first point. But my second point really is that all this misinformation on social media, on the internet. We've only had the internet for a very short period in human history. How do we do it old school? Yeah? We would trot along, if we didn't have the information at home, we'd trot along to our local library, ask a friendly librarian, listen, I want to know about vaccines. Can you direct me to how to find out about vaccines, the different type of vaccines and what they're about? And you realise that vaccines are considered the most safest form of medicine there is. People will take pills pills, all kinds of different pills that are manufactured by these big drug companies, all chemicals and stuff. But vaccines is a much more natural form of medicine. It's been going for hundreds of years. In fact, I think the first vaccine was against smallpox because some doctor realised that milkmaids, when they were milking the cows, they didn't get smallpox when there was a smallpox epidemic about. And from there, the first vaccine, I think it was back in the 1700s.
Yep.
Yeah? Do your research, yeah? You owe it to yourself to arm yourself.
Yeah, but the problem is, if you do your own research on the internet, you will often come up with the right answer. You'll come up with websites that are authoritative, that have all the information that you need. But you may also stumble across several that are conspiracy theory websites, and conspiracy theories really depend on something that sounds plausible. Like we had the caller earlier saying, oh, well, my twin brother, he got a heart condition and it was because of the Pfizer vaccine. Well, I mean, he's drawn that conclusion. I don't know what medical evidence there would be to support that, but there may have been somebody else who got a heart condition at the same time a few days after taking a vaccine. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the vaccine was responsible for that, but you build up sort of all over the world, you find 100 cases where within a few days of taking a vaccine, people had a similar reaction, which may be complete coincidence. But according to that website, it is gospel truth.
That's what I say. Don't just always rely on the internet.
No, exactly. No. You're right. We agree. Thomas, thank you. Maria in Croydon, I'm afraid we've only got about 45 seconds, Maria.
Well, yes, hello. Thank you for taking my call. What I wanted to say is that vaccination is never 100% true. It means that you can't think that you don't get disease just because you had vaccination. It's never reliable in this way. So you have to take into consideration that even if you had vaccination, you can still get it. And the same happened with this woman caller that you were talking to. She said she had vaccination and she still got it. So, it's never 100% that you might get it or you might not get it.
Nothing is ever 100%, is it? There's always a risk involved in taking anything.
But what happens if you are in the category of people who will get side effects? What will the parents do then?
Well, I have to say, I don't know this for a fact, but I haven't heard of side effects from people taking the vaccine. Maria, thank you very much indeed for your call. Well, that is the end of the programme. Thanks for all of your calls and messages this evening. I'm back tomorrow from 7. Now, if you missed any of this evening's show, you can, of course, listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. And don't forget, new episode of Where Politics Meets History with Tessa Dunlop and myself coming to your phone tomorrow if you are already a subscriber. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Henry Riley. But right now, Ben Kentish.
Thanks very much indeed, Ian. Hello there. A very good evening this Monday night. Ben Kentish here with you on LBC. Coming up.
Young people do want to work, so it's just about giving them the opportunity to work and providing them with the relevant support to do so.
Britain's youth unemployment rate has topped that of the rest